Dr. Obadele Kambon. Right, okay. So, let me just write this down. As I told you, I'm doing this project, Geography of the African Diaspora Global Survey, and really looking at the distribution of people of African descent all over the world. And I'm not defining them in other than, they say or they appear or it seems or whatever. But this right here is an additional component. Since I'm here in Ghana, I went to look at somewhat of the opposite direction, people from the diaspora who are have moved here in Ghana. So, how long have you lived in Ghana?
I moved in 2008, so going on 6 years now.
Okay. And where did you live before you moved to Ghana?
Immediately before, I lived in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that where you're from?
No, I was born in Brooklyn, raised in North Carolina, and then went to undergrad in Atlanta, grad school in Wisconsin.
That's right. You went to Morehouse?
Yeah, I went to Morehouse in Atlanta. UW-Madison, Wisconsin.
Did you? Okay. I went there for an exchange program when I was in undergraduate school.
My condolences to you.
I loved it. Oh, it was great. It was the zenith.
In the summer.
No. Oh, well, that. Yeah, I thought I was going to lose my toes and my ears.
Right.
But, yeah, the lake was frozen.
Yeah.
I left Houston. It was 80 degrees.
It's lakes on either side of the isthmus. So this one's frozen, that one's frozen, and then the wind goes across it and cuts straight into your bones.
And it's not that cold in Brooklyn?
Well, I was only there for 1 year. I was born
okay.
there, but then I was raised.
Oh, okay then. Okay.
So I don't remember.
Well, I guess I was at Madison only one semester, but that was the zenith of the protest movement. We were protesting everything.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, Madison is still very much like that.
Okay, that's good. I mean, to hear, because I had a colleague who went there, and he was like, "Oh gosh, it's gotten so conservative now, reactionary, I guess." But
I know we were protesting for stuff. We had the Black Law Students Association, and then what is this? The Black Graduate Students, and we were organizing to get different programs in and lecture series.
Wow, even then, and this is what, like 2005 or?
2000. I was there 2002 to 2005.
Okay. You did your undergrad at Madison?
No, Morehouse.
Oh, okay then. When you were saying you were protesting, it was in Atlanta or in Madison?
Actually, that was more in Atlanta at Morehouse, because I remember they had shooting Amadou Diallo.
Oh yeah.
And they had this thing, Crown Forum, which is every Thursday you have to go there, wear a suit and tie, and listen to This is How to Be a Good House Negro.
I remember that. I was there I took some Upward Bound students there about 2 or 3 summers ago. At that program.
And they had some generic program where, like, this is supposed to be the leading black male institution. We should be dealing with police brutality. We should be dealing with these types of things. And they didn't want to do it, so we did a sit-in, and we shut down the administration building. And then eventually we ended up putting on a conference about privatized prisons, police brutality, and all these.
Okay, that sounds very Morehouse man, Okay, so what were the reasons that you decided to move to Ghana?
Okay. I had come to Ghana first in 1998, and my mother brought me here.
Oh, okay.
She was doing training as a traditional spiritual practitioner in the Akan spiritual system.
Okay.
And she was bringing other people who were training under her. And, at that time it was just like, oh, this is mom's thing, whatever. But between the first time and the second time I came, I had a very life-changing experience when I was still in undergrad.
You came, when you came in 98?
That was with my mother.
Okay, and that was before, that was when you were still in high school, or?
No, that was my, going into my sophomore year, was the summer going into my sophomore year.
Oh, okay.
And I ended up having 2 sophomore years.
Oh, okay. So you spent the sophomore year over here?
No, it was the summer before my first sophomore year.
Okay.
And, by the time I went back, you know, I was just doing. It was my first time away from home, so I was kind of getting off into all types of things, and only doing enough to keep my scholarship. I was on a full ride academic scholarship. So they said the minimum is a 3.0 GPA. My GPA must have been like 3.0000162, repeating. And yeah, so from coming to Ghana and then going back, I started going back to that same type of thing, and I had a very life-changing experience where basically I came to see that those things that I was doing were not necessarily in my best interest, academically, health-wise, or anything else, you know. So then I withdrew from all of my classes from that semester and got a waiver that said, you know, basically I could stay at home and, you know, kind of get my stuff together. And between that time and then the next summer, we came back to Ghana, and I came back with a very different orientation as opposed to, you know, this is just more of the African stuff I grew up with. It was like, you know, this is a part of me. This is, you know, what I need to know. So I would, especially with the language, hassle everybody. How do you say this? How do you say this? How do you say this? What's this? And so that was 99. I went back for my sophomore year. From then on, all 4.0, kept the grades, you know, up. And
oh my gosh, that gives me hope for my grandson.
Yeah. And then, you know, basically, once I got back there, I was able to, you know, just basically keep my grades up, do everything that I needed to do. And I decided to do study abroad. And that was for my junior year. So I spent the whole year here. And because I had already attained a conversational level of fluency, they placed me out of the generic classes that they were doing with Chi. And I have one-on-one sessions with Professor Ajikun. And then the second semester, I just took classes with the native speakers who've been doing it their whole lives. I was like, hey, time to step it up. So poetry, prose, you know, plays, everything.
Did you always have an affinity for languages?
No, not at all. If you ask my high school Spanish teacher, she would be like, this guy would never learn.
Oh, God, Spanish. We can all learn Spanish.
Yeah, not me, because well, one, I didn't see how related to me, how it was relevant or relative to me. So myself and another guy, Ant, we would just hang out and hit on the girl, what is her name? Angela, I think. We just said, yeah, let's go to class because Angela's there. And then I also took French in middle school, and it was the same thing. Me and this guy, Joe, we would play tic-tac-toe in the back. Like, later. So yeah, it was only once I got to African languages that I was like, this is my language. That the motivation, and then also developing of the skills to be able to retain it. And, you know, for me, motivation is the most important point to be able to learn the language. If you don't have that, I can't tell you. But even like now teaching it, I can tell students who are going to do well from those who won't, because they tell you that in their very first class. I'm going to get it. I'm going to do it. I got these people. I'm hassling these people in my neighborhood. I'm like, this person's going to get it. Other people are like, I don't know, you know, I don't know if I even have enough time, and, you know, it's going to be hard. I think it's like, I'm like, you're telling me something. So now I have to try to overcome this thing, your own sanity. So anyway, all those background experiences, once I decided to repatriate, that's what put Ghana higher than other places, because I also went to grad school and learned Yoruba there and did advanced study in Nigeria, Ibadan. And that was another place I was considering. Also picked up Wolof as well initially informally, and then I started taking formal classes with that. So Senegal and Gambia were also on the radar for that. But because I think the major difference was I had done study abroad here, I was familiar with the university, and I had experience at Wisconsin. I had gotten done with all my coursework. and all I need to do is get my committee together. And my supervisor for my master's thesis kind of blocked me from getting my committee together with the rationale that, oh, we don't have enough people who can read in linguistics and pure linguistics. You would need to pull people from the linguistics department, and those who had a background in linguistics, they went off into second language acquisition, stylistics, and other things, and not, what I was doing with. So
now you were doing your master's at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Okay, then in linguistics.
I ended up with 2 masters, one in linguistics, one in African languages and literature.
Okay.
And I initially went there for African language and literature because that was the only PhD program in the country, in that. And they say when you come in, you can either do linguistics or you can do literature. They say that, but if you're not doing literature, you're going to be in trouble when it gets up to PhD time. Because
I can see
you
that.
do all your coursework in linguistics with linguistics professors, but now you need to get a committee together. It has to be something like 3 from the department and then somebody from somewhere else. And nobody else in the department is doing linguistics. Everybody's literature, film, cinema.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you about another department because at UF the linguistics people that I know they're in English sort of, but in film but I think we just got a linguistics something. I don't think it's a department though. Yeah, linguistics is I like, wow, I wish I had even known about linguistics when I started school because I just found I took just one little course as a freshman and I was like, wow, this is so interesting, So what other countries in Africa have you lived, let's say, for 1 or more years, at least, or visited?
I've visited quite a few, but this is the only one that I've lived in, like doing study abroad. I lived here. And, before we do that, the main thing that caused me to repatriate, in Chicago, I had a run-in with the law. I was part of a survival training group where we did firearms training, we did weapons training, we do martial arts training, all of this out in the woods, and some of the times we would have high schools that we would take there. And as we're out there, of course, we have firearms. Well, right after that weekend that we were doing that, I went back to Chicago and it was in my trunk. And the police decided to pull me over. And then they decided to say it wasn't in my trunk. They decided to say it was under my seat. And it was loaded like I'm about to do a drive-by or whatever to make that a felony. So I had community support. I had all types of people came out from all over the country wearing African clothes, filled out the courtroom. They're like, what is this? I had a great lawyer, Andre Grant, who his final summation was something out of like a movie.
Wow.
And we caught them on 2 things. One, they said they never went into the trunk. And then we said, well, how did we find this? It was the police car key. And they just didn't even know what to say about it. It was like, how did you get the car key? And the night that they arrested me, they were like, well, where is it? Where is it? I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. And come to find out that as they dumped all the stuff out of this bag, they put their keys there, and then when they were putting it back, they put their keys in.
That sounds like a TV movie.
Yeah. So then,
wow.
This is in the middle of the preliminary, whatever. Like, well, then where did the key come from? Now they're like, oh, we need recess. We don't know what to do. But that was a smoke screen because the actual thing that we had was me and my father went back a week after and found an eyewitness. Very credible, straight down to earth brother. Yeah, I saw you. Who else dresses like that walking down 75th Street or whatever? So he came and blew it out of the water because he said exactly what happened. They went into the trunk. Well, when they went, did they pull the gun out and wave it? What do you think this is? So at the end, the judge just was like, I find you all to be more credible than the police, and threw it out. So
so that means definitely you have to leave Chicago.
Yeah. And with that, when I was on the witness stand testifying, I said, as long as I'm here within their jurisdiction, on a whim, they can do what they did to Oscar Grant. They can do what they did to Amadou Diallo. They can, just on a whim, they see you, you're black, they don't care.
Yeah.
You got these MAs and you're teaching at these
Yeah.
schools, at
Yeah.
this university. None of that comes up if you're black. Let's go on a fishing expedition.
And especially if you've gotten off
Right.
from them.
Right.
Good gosh, yeah.
So that was the major turning point. I decided, so within a year, I said I was going to raise $40,000 working 18 different jobs, teaching at Northeastern Illinois University, Chicago State University, Malcolm X College, Betty Shabazz, DuSable, all these places, and I ended up with $30,000. But I said I'm out. I'm not going to spend another winter here in Chicago. So I came and moved my whole family here, and that was the decision. But the background information was what led up to me saying why Ghana specifically as opposed to other countries.
And why? And I wanted to know too. You know, why when you say repatriated, you brought that up. You know, before we went into all of these other things, because I didn't know whether you had like moved here to go to school and then you decided to stay, but you definitely, when you moved from the U.S., you were planning on moving to Ghana to live.
Yeah, I plan on moving to Ghana. I never plan to set foot in the U.S. again, and I still haven't been to the embassy because that's considered U.S. property. So I have no intention to set foot on U.S. soil again. But also, I did plan on coming here specifically to go to school because I had gotten up to that far with my PhD and just couldn't get my committee together. And that was even why I moved to Chicago, because it was still close by. I was like, if things work out in Madison, I can just go back in, re-enroll, and do whatever. But that was the closest black community that I could be at and still kind of be in the mix. Plus, I was training in capoeira there, and then the survival training skills. So I took that up to the instructor level with both of those, and that was part of it. But then coming from here, or coming to here, I was like, I know the linguistics department. I have my background in linguistics. I did my thesis in linguistics, so let me come here. And, that ended up being the best, option in retrospect.
Now, you came here to do your PhD in linguistics?
Right.
Okay.
In linguistics specifically.
Okay. And so how did you get accepted? You applied and...
Yeah, I applied. I went through the whole process. And I knew some of the professors from before because, like, Professor Sa was instructing the general course for the study abroad. Professor Ajicom, he had directly instructed me. The one who ended up being my supervisor, Professor Osama, I didn't meet him. I didn't know him when I was here before.
Osama, Kwame Osama. Okay, yeah.
Kwaku,
yeah.
Right. But however it worked out, he ended up being my supervisor. And that was great. And the thing that was great about it is because I picked up exactly where I left off at, Madison. They said, here's the UK style of PhD, so all you need to do is get your committee together and start writing. I was like, well, that's where I was. I did all my coursework. Now I just needed to get my PhD committee together and start writing. So, and he is tough. He is very tough.
Yeah. Prof. Osama?
Yes. He's very... very tough, but that was good because I ended up getting the best PhD thesis award, and it's because of how tough he was. He said, go do this, go do this, go do that, read this 600-page book, read that 800-page book, go to the fields, go to Kumasi, Kofridia, Akropong, Itre. I want elders and youth, a second phase of it.
Oh, gosh.
And at a certain point, as it was getting closer to the end, I begged. Let that be for the postdoctorate. I begged.
Oh, shucks. Yeah, because apparently I was just reading in the the newsletter, and he said similar thing about you that you said about when you get students in there. He said, guys, I knew when this young man came in that he was going to do it. He had that motivation.
Right.
Well, let's see. Okay, you had a family when you moved here, wife and kids.
Yeah, well, one child. At the time.
Yeah, they were born in the U.S.
Right. Right. So my daughter was born in Chicago, and that was actually the most painful part of that whole court proceeding, is because she and I were supposed to get married on August 17th, 2007, and because of that, I wasn't allowed to leave the state. So the wedding had to be postponed, and the wedding is now happening on August 17th of 2014, exactly 7 years to the date. So we're going to have it at the Botanical Gardens
Oh,
in this
when?
community.
When did you get married?
Yeah, right here.
When? In August?
August 17th, Marcus
Oh,
Garvey's birthday.
shucks. Oh, okay, really?
Yeah.
Ah, shucks. Well, we're leaving on the 12th.
Oh, wow.
Shucks.
Wow. We
Well,
gotta keep you around for 5 more
congratulations.
days.
Well, I wish.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that is wonderful.
Yeah,
That
so
is.
it's really that, how to put this? It's really a story of victory that in light of all this stuff, that we have been through to say, we're doing on the same day in Africa. Later for you,
yes.
police. And, that...
And there's something about the year, the 7,
Exactly. Exactly. 2007 to 2014. Exactly 7 years. So, and another thing that was interesting, have you ever seen The Spook Who Sat by the Door or read that?
No, I've just read it in freshman year.
Right,
yeah.
right. Well, one of the actors who was in the movie ended up being a real-life detective in Chicago. And he was extremely helpful in making sure that things went smoothly. He knew it was a trumped-up thing and whatever.
Well, that was good. I guess it probably had something to do with you, too, because so many times you hear that when, young black men get into these legal situations, everybody just backs off.
Yeah.
Well, that was good.
Yeah, we rallied a lot of community support. I was teaching at that time in again, a good 12, 13, 14 schools. So sometimes, it would be the children, all of them dressed in their uniforms, red, black, and green, coming in, by the dozens.
Oh, good. It's great.
Yeah, and then we had a fundraiser. Where was that? I think that was at Northeastern. But yeah, and then had an online fundraiser, people, donating via PayPal and things like that. Oh
gosh, all the stuff you have to do and you're innocent and they're trumping up, that is awful.
Yeah.
Gosh.
But, they don't care that you're innocent. I was just looking at this Fruitvale Station about Oscar Grant, this brother with, a young child, a 4-year-old daughter, and they put him on the pavement, face down, and shot him in the back.
Where was this? I didn't hear about
this. This is in Oakland. This was a major thing, Oscar Grant case, and it happened in 2009, I want to say. And I've been following it.
Okay, this is 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no.
So now it's a major motion picture.
No, that was I think there was a journalist that somebody from the hood in Oakland shot. That was several years ago.
No, that's
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know. It's so awful that, my mother lived in Chicago for forever, so I just have, I didn't grow up there, but I would go there about it. The first thing I liked about it was that it was clean.
That's what I thought, because I was used to going up to New York, and my first impression was it's like a clean New York.
Yes.
It's like New York, but it's clean. Where's all the trash? What's going on here?
But the second thing was that, gosh, it's the most racist place.
Oh.
Worse than well, I'm not going to say worse than the South. Worse than the South in certain ways.
It's Mississippi transplanted. You got the same it's everybody who's there who's black came from Mississippi or Alabama
or
and
Arkansas.
or Arkansas, and all their overseers came up with them and became the police. And Daly is like the massa.
Well, I was attributing it to all of these Eastern Europeans who came over, and they never have seen blacks or heard of blacks. The only thing they hear about blacks is the stereotypes, and so they get over here and they have this fortress, and they're afraid. They keep out of our neighborhood. So, what other African countries? You've been in Nigeria.
Yeah, Nigeria, Burkina, Mali, Senegal, Gambia, most recently South Africa.
Oh, okay.
And that was my first time out of West Africa because I've, basically been around here.
And you were going to these places for what reason?
Different reasons for different times. For Nigeria, it was for advanced Yoruba, so I had been studying it for a year, and then they had me be a TA, and because they didn't have advanced Yoruba in the U.S. at that time. It was, all these schools that put on Scali, Florida was one, all these places. But they didn't have advanced Yoruba that year, so they said I could take the FLAS Title 6 fellowship. We have that. Right, and take that funding and go straight to Nigeria. So that was great because it was also a one-to-one, interaction with a professor. and he was teaching the intermediate when I was first starting off with the intro. And my wife, actually, we met at that very first time where I was taking Yoruba, she was taking Wolof.
Oh, okay.
And
in Nigeria?
no, this is at Michigan State. In Lansing,
where
Michigan.
did Michigan State come in? I didn't get that one.
Okay. Once I graduated, we're trying to cram a lot in. In undergrad, I took hieroglyphics, and my teacher, he's now president of the Association of the Study of Classical African Civilizations, but he's very steeped in the language. And between leaving and then coming back, I was coming back with all this tree that I had learned even more, and making all these connections with the hieroglyphics. And he was like, "You need to go to grad school for this. I'm placing you at Wisconsin-Madison. Go get a PhD and don't come back until you do."
Okay, taking hieroglyphics. Is it a spoken language at all?
No, it's written.
Okay,
it's written, but there are people who try to speak it, which ends up being quite a fiasco because it doesn't. It's not written with the vowel sounds for the most part. So in a convention, like what Egyptologists do is that they just put an S sound anywhere that they're not sure. So it ends up sounding like a lot of S and says and des, but it's just because of a convention.
Okay. Was it ever spoken, or was it always written?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was spoken.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, some of the work of Sheikh Anta Diop, Sheikh Anta Diop in Wolof as it's pronounced, that he and Theophile Obenga, my teacher studied with Theophile Obenga, who was a contemporary, and they presented at the 74 UNESCO conference on the peopling of Egypt and showing how there were black people, how even the name of it means black people. So anyway, yeah, it was spoken, and you find these connections even today with the written language. Let me show you. This is one of Obenga's books, and like he'll show you the word in the hieroglyphics, and then he'll show you the same word. Like, for example, this is the letter B, A, E, Bai, and then shows it in different African languages, contemporary, and it shows you the same thing, Iba, Tuba, Ma, Ateba, in Trieste, Abe, and then in Yoruba, Ope. So you can still find the same thing, like Bu is for place, and you can find Bu in Tri is Bao. So you can still find, because at one point in time we were in the Sahara, we were in the Nile Valley, all humanity started in the Nile Valley, so it's like just a question of when did you leave, more so than anything. So,
well, I hate to admit this, but even when I was reading history books by Sheikh Anta Diop, I was like, could you just get over this Egypt thing? Why do we have to keep going to Egypt? Can't we find, bona fide black African civilizations that have done well in other parts of Africa?
Yeah,
but, now I see. Why? Why can't we claim Egypt if it's actually part of our history? Yeah. It's not, what is it? Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's where there's quite a battle over Egypt because of various reasons. But when you see what they try to do to try to whitenize it, then we start to ask, well, why are they doing that? There's some type of point of doing that, especially when the people themselves draw themselves as black. They're named for themselves as black people. Then.
And it's not the Arabs that are there now are not the original inhabitants.
Exactly.
I remember going to years ago. Gosh, that was like the 80s, was it or so? They with King Tut's. They had a big tour of him, and it came to Houston. So we went to the talk with it, and there was this white woman who said, and this was just the craziest thing. She said she had some pictures of black people, sculptures, bases on the frescoes, for like whatever they call them there. And she said, somebody asked her, well, gosh, are those black people? And she said, well, I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means, but I do know that doesn't mean black people.
Right.
You know, it's just like, I don't know what it means,
Right.
but I do know
That's
what it
all
doesn't mean.
I do.
Right. It's just like,
Right.
gosh, really?
Right.
You're right about it. So why make that big of a point?
Yeah.
And oh gosh, anything that seems like it's good or progressive, like the Tutsi, they're turning them into Nilotic, you know, high-cheeked, whatever, you know, non-blacks.
Yeah, that's the source of a lot of the issues. You know, even going to the genocide is that they say they're not black people. They just they're white people who just down there.
Yes, that's the truth. So, how did you prepare for your move to Ghana? You know, raised the $30,000 and brought your family over. But obviously, you just didn't come over. You applied for admission to the university and started. You know.
Yeah, I actually started the application process once I got on the ground here. It was you know, physical forms that you had to fill out and take around to these places. So I applied as soon as I got here, and actually, I applied as soon as I got here, and it wasn't until the next year that I finally got admission, because things don't go as quickly as perhaps they could.
We do know that.
So,
and what type of visa did you come on when you originally?
I want to say tourist visa, because my mother and I, we started like the same trip that she brought me on. You know, we ended up doing it together, where I'm doing the language piece, and then you know, she's doing the spirituality piece. So, you know, every year up to that point, like 2007. Actually, she did it from 98, 99, 2000, and that was the year she was president of the Association of Black Psychologists, and they brought the convention here, so it's like about 2,000 psychologists or so. Then she stopped doing it up until 2007. So then we did 2007, then we did 2008. So when we came for that, that gave me a chance to kind of reignite some of those linkages, ties here. And then, so that was in the summer around July. Then we came back September 6th.
July
of 2008.
Okay, right.
And actually, we had come 3 times that year, like May, and then July, and then September was for good, like to be here.
And so, is she happy like you're living in Ghana?
Who, my mom?
Your mother,
oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Association of Black Psychologists. I bet she knows Dr. Carolyn Tucker. Or have you heard of her?
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. And so, what is your immigration status in Ghana, and are you a Ghanaian citizen?
Not yet. I'm actually trying to do naturalization process. So what I have been all up to this point was doing the yearly residence permit as a student, but now transitioning from student to research fellow.
That's right. You just graduated.
Yeah, I just graduated. So my status is transitional. So I have somebody who's working on that for me. So that's an everyday. You call them. All right. So where are we at with this thing now?
It took, I know, 6 months to get our residence permit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm in the throes of that right now.
Well, at least you're in there. So, I mean, so you probably aren't going for dual citizenship, right?
You know, what I want to do is I want to do outright naturalization. What people are advising me to do is to do the dual citizenship. And that one is kind of difficult because the way it's set up is you're supposed to have 2 Ghanaian parents in order to do it. However,
really? Yeah. Oh gosh, that is
at least one parent has to be born in Ghana, a Ghanaian citizen, and that kind of is set up to kick out the diasporans.
Yeah, I couldn't understand that. That I've talked to other people and they've said that it is, just darn near impossible. And I was wondering, at one time there was this real push, obviously with Nkrumah, then with Jerry Rawlins. I remember when he was the one who sort of put this thing up.
He said it a lot, but he never implemented any policies to make that happen. I remember we were here, that was like the late 90s. He was giving a lot of speeches saying that was around Emancipation Day, founding Panafest and all these things.
Okay, Panafest. I haven't been to a Panafest, yeah.
So around that time, and then they had Asimanso, the repatriation of the bones from the African burial grounds in New York. Yeah. So around all that time, you had a swirl around, we're going to do this for the diaspora.
I mean, and I don't understand what is the pushback. Now, I remember and maybe he's a little, upset about this, because when he was running for president, I had this friend, I don't know the name, Dr. John Bilson, who was he's an erstwhile politician, and he and Rollins, I think they sort of had a little mentor relationship, and then when he switched over to non-democratic the way he thought it, then they just became total enemies. And so when he was running, he filed a suit and saying, you're not qualified to run for president because both of your parents or grandparents should be Ghanaians, and Rollins isn't. I mean, he lost the suit, I think, probably just. But I think it's really interesting that they would put that. That certainly puts diasporans out.
That's the point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see what point is there.
Well, the way some people have said it to me, like I have a friend who is Ewe, and he's in his late 60s, probably early 70s now, and he lived in the U.S. for 50 years, longer than I have. And, when he came back, he started to work at Valley View University, and he was talking about how, and he was going there with no pay, full professor and whatever, but he just wanted to give back. And the pushback that he got as a Ghanaian, both parents, however many hundreds, thousands of years you want to go back, that, the people who were here felt quite threatened that here's somebody from the diaspora come with whatever expertise, and they saw it as a threat that he's trying to take our jobs.
I can see that. I've heard that. But gosh.
So that's to somebody who's a Ghanaian who's coming, and they're giving that type of pushback. And case studies like Liberia and Sierra Leone and some of the friction that goes on there, that the way certain people see it as that they don't want this to be like, oh, here you have an influx of all these diasporans, and then you have this tension that goes on from the continental versus the diasporans. The diasporans see they're better or whatever, this type of thing.
Yeah, that I can see that. I can see that. I don't know, for some reason I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's interesting. I was listening to this program one morning, and they were talking about some politics and this and that. And this one Ghanaian who had lived in the U.S., and this woman, actually said, and you coming back here with your American accent, here she was talking with this British accent. That didn't seem to be a problem. Oh, gosh, well, yeah, that is, well, that's going to continue to be one. Well, there is a slight difference. Liberia and Sierra Leone, they had somewhat different experiences. It looked like my husband, his sort of analysis is Liberians came back from the U.S. and they didn't have experience with colonization, whereas the British did. So because these are American Liberians. I mean, I can understand why people got tired of them after a while. Okay. So I was going to ask you, do you plan to apply for Ghanaian citizenship? And you do. Yeah. But the dual, I mean, that's impossible. Unless you can go and find some ancestors here. Like I was looking for the village of McDade.
My last name is a Dagbani name, Kambon. And matter of fact, that's Dr. Nambingne is going to be presenting on the Kambon sale.
I was trying to find that email.
Right.
Yeah,
so everything with Kambon is a warrior, and it's associated with the Asante people who came up and
Okay, and not Nigerian.
No.
Because your parents, they were thinking that it was Nigerian, or were they?
Yeah, but I think it's in both places that you have Kambon as a name, but it's different meanings in the two places.
Yeah, you can see that. That's true. And plus, people migrated out. The Ga people are from Nigeria,
Yeah, and the Ewe also say they come from like that Benin, Nigeria side.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Matter of fact, we're working on a project of people who are in Ghana but who practice a Yoruba spiritual system. So they're not ethnically Yoruba, but they've adopted this over however many years.
You can certainly see that. Okay, first experiences, I guess, finding a place.
I'm going to go and pour water very quickly.
Okay.
Do you need anything? Can I use some water? Or?
No, thank you. Okay. Finding a place to live. And I guess these are all things that you'd been here. So how is that? Finding a place to live for your family?
Well, initially when I came, we had some challenges, and my wife ended up going back after about a month's time, and I ended up getting a house at Shoma Estates up on the mountain here, so that's maybe a good 30 minutes away from campus. But the whole thing is I was looking for some place that was close to campus, and I was like, this is great, because in Chicago we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and it was $1,000 a month. So here they were like $500 a month, and this just had 500 Ghana cedis, and they changed it to dollars on the low.
Oh, really?
But I was like, I felt like I was getting over on them, because I was like, it's a 4-bedroom house, fully furnished, came with cable, internet, generator, a water catchment system.
And that's 2008.
Yeah.
Gosh, I bet now these prices have gone up. They are crazy now.
I don't know what that would be, what that house would go for now. But at that time, I was like, I almost feel bad, like I'm getting over on this. He doesn't know what he had. He gave me a German Shepherd dog.
Oh, gosh.
Fruit trees in the front and the back. I was like, this is just great.
Well, I went to visit this colleague, Professor Shandov. She was professor here when I was working on my dissertation. She was so nice to me. So she invited me over for lunch, and I went over. Her place is right over there, right around Hatso, and that I just fell in love with that area. It's so nice. You look up in the hills. The streets are smooth.
Right.
It's not all gated. I mean, they have gates, but it's not like a fortress.
Yeah.
So that must be that. Now you live over there now, right?
Well, that was a Showman, which is further out. I only did 1 year there, and then I was like, you know what? It's too expensive. I came to see it, and I really wasn't getting over for that price. I could have gotten a lot more and a lot closer.
Oh, really?
So I had a friend who, the same one who I was saying lived in the U.S. for 50 years, he had built a house out in Frafraha. So it's on the Dodua Road going out right past the area.
I heard that.
So he let me stay there rent-free for 2 years just to house sit. And that's what I credit the most for me being able to pay for school, because they charged in dollars. When I first came, they thought I was Ghanaian. So they charged me 500 Ghana cedis for the year.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And I was like, wow, I could be a student my whole life. I may just... I don't know when I'm going to get done with this PhD. It's cool. And then... that didn't last. They saw the passport and all this, and then they said, you know what? It went up to $4,000 a year. So that's a big jump.
Yeah, that really.
So
and you had to pay it yourself.
Yeah. So the only thing that really assisted, other than him letting me stay there, is that I taught online, so I was getting paid in dollars.
You've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, since 2006. I was doing that from Chicago. And what I did was and that's even part of why I wanted to do the streaming here with the seminars coming up for this next semester.
I saw that.
That for a while, even in Chicago, I was doing these simul classes. I would have some who are streaming live from wherever they are, and then those who are in Chicago. So they're interacting, they're doing their dialogues back and forth together and all this. And everybody got a kick out of that, like, wow, we can do this with people in LA and New York and whatever. So, so I was getting paid from that, and that was in dollars. So I was able to sustain myself and, get a vehicle and things like this. And then also... as I mentioned, I had 18 jobs on the way coming, and I retained quite a few of those. So I was doing graphic design, web design. Even I did the Department of Linguistics website. I don't know if you've seen it, but for the 50th anniversary, they had
I'll have to look at it.
Website.
Because the newsletter looks so good. You were involved in that. I mean, the AIS newsletter, and it's so easy to pull up, because I hate these things. You pull up these wonderful websites, and it takes forever to load. or go back to what is that? I'll have to ask you about that later.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Right,
You know.
right. Well, from our side, we're down to 1.67 seconds for the load time. As soon as you click it, boom, it's there.
Oh, okay then. Yeah. Okay.
But
Well,
there are
there's
things you
an
can do
art
to
to that.
customize
Huh?
it. Yeah.
Okay. And so you said your wife moved back,
Yeah.
and then you found a
moved
place, and then she moved back with your daughter,
Right.
and then you all came back,
Right.
and that's when you were living in Ashaman Hills, or
No, that
the
was
front
okay. So Ashroma was the first place she came to visit, but then went back again.
Why?
Well, she and I, we weren't doing too well
Okay.
at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of stress came from that whole court case.
Yeah.
When I was going for my first, whatever they call it, preliminary trial, whatever, she went on a cruise to the Caribbean, and I took a lot of issue with that. I was like, if you want a woman who will stand, yeah, stressed. She was pregnant at the time, so the police left her on the side of the road when she was pregnant. You know, took me and locked me up, and I had to get bailed out. So, you know, there was a lot of stress and a lot of tension between us. You know, me feeling like she wasn't supportive and her feeling like, you know, whatever. You know, I couldn't prevent her from getting kicked out on the curb in the night in Chicago, on the south side, whatever.
Okay.
So I don't know all the things, but it was very tense. And all that tension built up, and within a month, we were like, you know, we're done. And then, you know, she came back. By that time, you know, I was done with her. I was like, you know, I still want my daughter in my life and all these things, but I was done with her, and I was even seeing somebody else at the time, which, you know, she didn't like that too much, because by that point in time, she then wanted to get back.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. But anyway, within a year's time from there, she came back, and by that time, she came back when I was in Frefa for the 2 years, coming at the end of those 2 years. So she came and moved in with me. Then we moved to Adenta, where there's no water. We were there for a year.
Adenta, gosh, I remember when Adenta was just starting up. Yeah.
And it's still just starting up as far as water is concerned. They haven't gotten anywhere with it.
Wow, you lived all over the greater Accra area.
And now I'm doing a 2-year lease at Hacho, so that's like an 8-minute drive from here.
Yes.
And I'm very happy with the place. It's 3 bedrooms and, you know, spacious enough.
How far from the, you know, the Andy Giagi Road is it? You know, when you go down to all the way. How far is it from that junction where you live?
To get from where I live to here is 8 minutes. So, you know, let's say 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what Professor Sharndorf said, that she walks over to the department sometimes when it's not so hot. Gosh. So how about the kids? Your daughter, how's she doing? I mean, obviously she seems to be doing well, but how was the transition when she came over?
When she came over, I was like, whose daughter is this? She was into Dora the Explorer, anything African she did not like. You pour libations, she started crying.
Oh, gosh.
You know, she don't want to speak this African language and this, that, and the third. And she was, what was she? She was like 3 at that time. I was like, all right, now we need to go through the decontamination process with you. Because whatever they did, you know, she was, when my wife went back, Kala, when she went back, she was staying with her mother. And they're into all this stuff. July 4th picnics and Christmas and this, that, and the third. And I didn't grow up with any of that. We were
really?
Like, no.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
But you were rebelling until you saw the light. That kids, I swear, you
know what?
Raise them up and they will turn into Presbyterian ministers.
You know what?
Before your eyes.
It wasn't rebelling. I would put it like this: I went to public school, so before that, my parents were very, you know, African centered, and you know, we were given African names at birth. We had a different diet. We were vegetarians our whole lives. Never stood up for the Pledge of Allegiance. Never sang the national anthem and whatever. But then, and it was different from my older sister. My older sister was raised for the most part in New York. So they had African-centered schools. They had all these cultural activities. And my parents decided that, okay, you can only do so much going to lectures and whatever. It's time to actually act on it. So they went and bought land out in the country, you know, built their own log cabin house with their own 2 hands in North Carolina. It's outside of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother's ancestors were enslaved in the next county over, Johnston County, and her grandmother had land in Wake County, so she ended up helping them get some land out there. So they dug their own well, built a log cabin out in the woods, built their cabinets.
And your mom's an academic?
Yeah, both my parents. They both have PhDs. My mother's a clinical psychologist, so she's not in university, but my father was teaching.
What's his field?
Education. Education. And they met at Columbia University. That's where my father got his doctorate from. And then my mother finished hers once we moved to North Carolina at Duke. But, you know, that was their thing of, you know, if we're saying we want to be free, we need to actually take steps for it. Now, the downside of that is that if you are stepping out away from this whole community of saying, oh, let's be African, but don't do it, well, now you lose that support system. So I had my preschool with an African Center preschool. After that, there was nothing. So that's even part of why I homeschool my daughter, because when I went to public school, it was like, what type of world is this? They calling me the N-word, and they calling me Black African booty scratcher. You know, I have the name Obadele, and calling me open the jelly, and this, that, and the third. So I got into not a lot, but some fights over things, and it was very much of a situation of, I'm now in an anti-African environment, and I need to know how to navigate this environment. So I saw myself as an anthropologist at the time. Like, I need to find out why Black people hate themselves so much. You know, because I didn't see it as much as they hate me, as that you all hate being Black, and because you see me being Black, then you hate me because I'm Black.
You were quite perceptive. That is
I think
true.
So, especially in retrospect. I'm like, so my whole thing was like, I'm studying these people. So I'm like, I'm studying these people. I want to find out why they hate themselves.
Well, you can see it. I mean, that's all you hear. This is backward. They're savages. It's awful.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so I got the full brunt of being a continental African. So my friends.
And this is in a black school? Predominantly black school in North Carolina?
Yeah, predominantly black. You know, they have what they call magnet schools, GT schools. So they're segregated in the sense of it's in the Black neighborhood, everybody's Black.
Exactly.
But then you have the
AP
classes.
Exactly.
So I was in the AP classes, advanced placement.
With the white kids and surrounded by the Black ones.
Once, like, everybody was together for, like, kindergarten and then first grade maybe, and then after that they started doing the separation thing. Have separate trailers for the AP students.
Oh,
you know
gosh. I guess that's classic. That's exactly how it is in Gainesville. I mean, this one school, East Side, and I remember one of my son's friends, when they were graduating from middle school and he went to go on East Side, he said, you know, East Side, highest SAT scores, highest murder rate. Now, that was an exaggeration, but that was sort of the way they looked at it.
But that's what the AP, I remember they had this thing, California Achievement Test, and they had where you could get the 99th percentile. I was like, how come I keep getting 99? I want 100%. I'm like, no, that's not what that means. I had some math to learn at that age, but that's how it was. Everybody in the AP were like the top performers in North Carolina. North Carolina was notorious for being like last in everything, but the AP students were like the ones who were doing whatever. So basically, with the whole thing of my cultural anthropology research was basically I had my own African self, which I came in there with. But then I also developed a self to adapt to this environment of fighting with people and doing whatever. And that gained probably the most expression when I went to high school. I said, you know, all these white people who I was in class with, I'm not speaking to any of them ever again. I'm getting my Black friends. I'm Black. I'm going to do whatever. So the challenge of that is once you decide to be Black as defined by the media and all this, that, and the third, it means that you're starting to do things that aren't necessarily in your best interest. So I started hanging out with, you know, other people. We used to like go and steal stuff from the mall, like little petty stuff. But you know, all of this was me. I I guess, giving fuller expression to this other personality
Yeah.
that I created to deal with that situation. And I stopped going by my first name. I started going by my middle name, Bakari, because that sounds less African. I didn't say that at the time, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I just want to use my middle name.
Like Barry Obama.
Right. That's all. No. But yeah, so. And then,
oh gosh, I know that's a difficult thing, you know, in high school, and I sometimes I even just think about it with boys, especially black boys, with boys generally. I mean, girls can be mean, but boys trying to navigate that being a man, a part of it, high school thing. Oh gosh.
Yeah, so it was quite pathological. We had a crew that we developed, a Black Ice Clique. And, we didn't really have any goals or vision or mission statement, but we just kind of hung out together and, stole stuff from the mall, I guess.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And we were probably, I want to say, the second coolest clique, but the first coolest clique, they all got arrested for robbing a movie theater.
Oh,
so then by graduation, we were the coolest clique for me.
how you get your street cred by getting arrested?
Right.
Oh, gosh.
So they ended up going to jail for some years, and none of them got their scholarships. Some of them were on sports scholarships and whatever.
Oh,
and I remember as I was finishing, I got the full academic scholarship to Morehouse. And everybody else was going to the local schools, A&T, mainly North Carolina A&T and stuff, Shaw University. How did you get to Morehouse? Because they're you with everybody else, you just
with us,
right? And that's what I would do. I would get the least grades possible. Everything they had, the borderline was, I want to say, 85%. So that's a B. 85 and above is a B. 84 and below is a C. So my scores were always 85.130 to the very minimum. But I blew all the tests out of the water. Because I remember, tests were always very easy for me, to the point where I would be doing a test and I would be laughing. Because I was like, how do you put this as an answer? This is just... It's
you need
comedy.
You need to be teaching that, because I know when I was in the Upward Bound program, that was the main thing, is the fear test, and I could just see it. Smart kids somehow could not get that knowledge in their head onto that paper the way it was organized. You could see it.
Yeah, but that was always I remember being in the test taking room laughing ha ha ha, that's funny. That's not right, ha ha.
Well, I've always been good on tests, but I sure wasn't laughing. I was sweating them.
But so yeah, and that's how I got the scholarship, because my grades were very mediocre. The definition of mediocre, exactly at the mediocre borderline. But the guy Andre Patillo, I still remember his name, the admissions officer at Morehouse. We went there to see how my admissions, whatever process was going, and he brought out my transcript and said, you could have done better than this. I was like, yeah, I know. And he said, with your test scores,
the test scores,
test scores, but that's part of the thing, is that a lot of these schools, they bring people in because of their test scores, so they can say all of our admissions applicants are at this level. So he ended up coming back out and said, this is your scholarship letter, full ride, academic scholarship. Because other than that, I definitely wouldn't have been going out of state or anywhere. So.
Yeah, that's because the grades can be, subjective.
Right.
They, at least sometimes they think, but supposedly, the test scores are objective. So with the kids, your daughter came over here. You had to re-Africanize her.
Yes, re-Africanize and de-whitenize.
Oh,
the two
gosh.
sides of the same coin.
And how long did that take?
Oh, it's ongoing, but I would say the first 6 months were the most difficult, because she's like, I don't want anything African. I want to see Dora the Explorer and this. And I was like, that's forbidden. Dora the Explorer is forbidden.
Oh, I like Dora the Explorer, actually.
I hate Dora the Explorer with a passion.
She's so progressive.
I hate Dora the Explorer with a passion. And one of the reasons why is because my daughter says she wants her hair to be straight and long like a princess. I say, you're gonna leave this planet today if you say this again to my face.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And a lot of that was from the role models that she had.
Oh yeah, that's
These
so
Doras
true.
and whatever.
Yeah.
You know, these movies and things that she was looking at. I was like, nope.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's
that's an ongoing thing. Oh gosh, I know how that's an ongoing thing.
You know, for now, it's not prominent anymore because of, you know, how we do homeschooling for one. Mm-hmm. So, and then her instruction for me at least is in Chi, and then her mother does English. Actually, we do Chi, and then we do like Yoruba as a subject area.
Okay. And does your wife speak either?
Yoruba.
She speaks Yoruba.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's when we
you
were
all met her.
Yeah.
Met.
When we met, she was doing Wolof, but she dropped Wolof.
Oh, okay.
But then she ended up doing Yoruba at Wisconsin-Madison. So we met before I went to grad school, and then she came like after I was a year in to Wisconsin-Madison and started doing Yoruba. And I taught her because I became the TA by that time. Yeah.
And your son, how old is your son?
He is now 1 year and March to July, going on 5 months now.
Okay. And what are
you? He
you?
was born on Ghana's Independence Day of all days.
Oh gosh, this just does it. Well, I guess this is the opposite. Like Obama's daughter's born on July the 4th. You know, I mean, this is interesting. So, what is he? What does he get to be a Ghanaian citizen, or do you have to go back to your grandparents?
No, he doesn't get to be a Ghanaian citizen. But once I become a Ghanaian citizen, then they will be eligible for dual citizenship.
And you think you'll be able to get naturalized? I mean, who do you know? Anybody who's been naturalized?
Yeah, I do. I know a couple of people. There's a guy who owns Legacy Gardens here in Kopiasi, and he's naturalized. He's coming from Jamaica.
And I'm asking. I'm not asking you this because I'm not questioning you. I'm just asking you. And why would you want to get naturalized?
I hate the U.S. I'm an African anti-American. So part of being an African anti-American is not having American citizenship or any ties to it. It's like when you are escaping from the plantation, at a certain point your walking papers, once you get free, you get burned. So, you know, it's probably along those same types of lines.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, I can understand that sentiment. I can understand you having that sentiment. I'm just going to proffer this, that, you know, because of the struggle, and I know you've heard this part too, that blacks have put in to make America, build America, that whatever their benefits there are to be in an America, I just think that we should take advantage of those. And this whole thing of transnationalism, it just sounds like an attractive one for me. I mean, I'm not going to change at this point in time. At one point in time, I thought about totally moving to Ghana and just did not. But at this point, I'm not. But I don't know. I would just sort of put that forward, that just in general, as your wife being a global person, that, you know, why not, whatever advantages you have, just avail yourself of them. So,
for me, one of the things is posterity. As we level up all these charges, you know, like Paul Robeson had this, we charge genocide over the years, over the decades and centuries. We've talked about all of the genocide and democide that's been from Tuskegee experiment, all these things. At a certain point in the future, it's going to be like, well, how come y'all didn't do anything about it? You know, how come y'all just stayed U.S. citizens? Here's the world's largest criminal organization, coup d'etats against Nkrumah, assassination of Lumumba. If you're saying that you know better, then how come, you know, you didn't do any better? And, you know, to me, I think everybody wants to be consistent, you know, to some degree or another, whether it's consistent with sanity or insanity, however you define it. So, you know, like if a person is praying to a white Jesus, then they're going to bleach their skin. They're saying we want to be consistent with every aspect of what we're doing. And I think it's similar on the other side, that if you're saying that you want to be sane, there comes a degree of tension of trying to have double consciousness, also known as schizophrenia. Because, all right, where's your allegiance and who are you? You know, at the end of the day.
That's really, the first time I even thought about this was years ago when I was in high school, and I saw a article in National Geographic that they were talking about these Christians in China. And the Christians in China, their pictures of Jesus and all of them, the disciples and everybody, were Chinese. And I was like, yeah, that makes so much. I mean, it was just like totally weird because Jesus is supposed to look like this, but it's just like everybody people who pray to their God looks like them, except for a small group of people. I mean, the whites have certainly turned him into a Dutch, God and everything. Yeah. But that's here, I mean, oh God, here is just going crazy with this Christian evangelism because I don't see any. Well, there is an Africanization of the Christian religion. I mean, it really is. It's syncretic and everything. It just seems to me that they're sort of basically just adapting it to a large extent, but still, that's just, I don't know, maybe it's just a transitional point.
I think so, because even for black people in the U.S. back in the 1880s, you have Bishop Henry McNeil Turner like, we should have a black, if we're going to pray to any God or Jesus, it should be black. And I remember John Henry Clark, he wrote The Boy Who Painted Jesus Black, and this is like going in, I want to say 1920s, 1930s.
Oh gosh, and that was considered criminal, blasphemous.
Especially at that time.
Yeah.
And then, you can go to places and see artwork that shows, black Jesus, whatever. And then after that, in the 60s, you have people who are like, why do we keep trying to paint this white thing black? And saying, all right, well, let's learn about our own African spiritual systems. And then you have people like Oyotunji, Yoruba Village, people go into African spiritual systems, Akan spiritual systems, Nana Dinizulu in New York. And like from that organization, I was born at home as well, like my children, and it was women from that organization who were the midwives who did that, and they were in the Akan spiritual system. So,
wow, your parents were quite remarkable.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. They still are.
Yeah, are quite remarkable.
But I see it as, if there is any type of lineal evolution to this thing, you may need to make all these European fictional imaginary characters black, and then after that, then you can start to say, well, why are we even doing this in the first place? What was it originally? Oh, is it based on Asar, aka Osiris, and the resurrection of him? Is it based on the story of Heru?
Well, in a way, I'm thinking,
how come we can't go back to learn what the original thing was?
In a way, it could be that it's just been adapted. It's been adapted. This is it. I mean, there was something on GTV, whatever, I forget, Live Life Today, which basically they do, the Christian version of everything. And they were mentioning, just how so many religions, true enough, they have the tug of war, the tug of war between the two brothers, and they're expelled and whatever. So, in a sense, when you look at many religions, they are so very similar. So it's just like, well, I don't know. Perhaps that's what it is. It's sort of merging together of this sort of European. Well, that's one of the things that was nice about going to Ethiopia, where I took all these pictures of their wall paintings where their Christ and all the disciples are woolly haired, Ethiopians, So
there's a Dr. Charles Finch from Morehouse School of Medicine.
Oh yeah.
He does a very good presentation on what does he call it? The Wheel of Heaven, and basically what he does is he breaks down how what you find in all these similarities that you find in these different spiritual systems and religions come from the fact that all of them at one point in time were allegories for things that are actually going on in the cosmos. So when you're talking about the sun stays down for 3 days and then it goes up 1 degree and now it goes all the way into spring, that's the equinox and solstice, that all of those things are saying that 12 disciples and all these different religions they're talking about 12. It's talking about the 12 constellations. It's talking about how the sun goes down and then eventually comes up. and that's why you have the Easter, which is the spring equinox. That's why you have the winter solstice, and that's when you're saying, oh, this is the birth of whoever the Savior is.
I mean, that makes sense. Because, people then who without distractions of TV and videos, they could observe nature and observe the heavens.
There's a documentary called Zeitgeist, and it's very good. It's very good for students because it's broken down to the simplest form. But they go into all these things, how Christianity was pulled from, to a large degree, the book of coming forth by day, these ideas of a judgment, all these types of things, the ideas of a savior, all of those are based on, at that time they said this is the story of the sun, that we're just anthropomorphizing to say, oh, it's a hawk with a body of a human being, but it's talking about this is the sun's movement, the sun is doing this, it's born in Virgo constellation, so that's where you get the virgin birth in every culture, because we're all looking at the same thing. So now when we create stories about it, all of it is the same storyline.
Yeah, really, it is. It is true, except for the crucifixion. To me, they could have left that one out. I mean,
that's the Southern Cross constellation. You can look at it. Matter of fact, on December 25th,
torturing your God. I mean, it's just like, I don't see how you get any converts to a religion where they torture the God. If they're going to do that to the God, what are they going to do to the basic people? Even though I understand the whole, the resurrection and everything, but that just, to me, that has always been just the strangest aspect of Christianity, even though it's the basic tenet of Christianity.
Yeah, that's the Council of Nicaea and all these types of things where a lot of these things were canonized and everything else, because at a certain point in time you had competing versions of it. Oh, it was just a spirit. No, it's a man, and blah, blah, blah. No, we're saying it's a man, and just believe it, and he walked on earth. And if not, we're killing you, we're killing you, we're killing you, we're killing you. So, that's where you get to this type of thing that as modern Christianity. But Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, he gives a parable of what if I, create this beautiful feast, wonderful feast, and then I invited everybody to it. So Greeks are coming, Romans are coming, Arabs are coming, they're all coming, and then they eat, they partake, then they go back to their land, they vomit it up, and then now they come back around to you and they're serving you this vomit and you're saying, oh, I can taste African spices in it. So this is a graphic way to say. I think you should
go around and tell that story. I think that would probably turn a lot of people off.
But this is, what African people gravitate to are those African elements that have been retained. Yeah. Of course, there's a lot that's going on inside the stomachs, the bile and the acid in their stomachs before they did that. But now they're bringing you this thing that you originally put together and understood. Yeah. And you're trying to pick through it. At certain points, like, well, why are we picking through this? We can go and find out what the original thing was. Maybe
they might be seeing it as being the real thing. Okay, here, what seems to be modern is actually what we were thinking and had conceptualized anyway. Maybe that's why it has come. It's so easy to come.
Yeah, it's very easy
here.
To come.
To take. Even this. I mean, just like all these things about Christianity, and I certainly grew up a Christian, but. I mean, even the sacrament, drinking blood and eating the body. I mean, dog, I know it's symbolic, but at some point in time, a lot of people, their religions or their practices where it's real blood and real body, and that's just the worst thing in the world, at least the way Westerners think of these things.
But they still do sacrifices in the West. They just call it executions.
Yeah, that's true.
Or lynchings. There's I remember Orlando Patterson has his book Rituals in Blood.
Orlando Patterson, his name keeps popping up. Yeah, but I don't know. He just seemed like he was very extreme. But I guess so.
I thought that's a very good point. He's saying that that there's some level of spiritual power that comes with sacrifices, and what they're doing is still they've been sacrificing black people the same way. So even though they're saying, oh, that's so barbaric, look at George Bush, how many black people did he execute during his time as governor? Look at they're still killing all these people,
obviously getting some, you're right, some power from that.
Oh, by all means.
We're moving forward. We're Yeah, that's the way I was thinking. You're talking about the soldiers, but yeah, there's executions in Texas.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's my home state.
And not just Texas, but all over. Matter of fact, they had to do a moratorium in Chicago because they were torturing this guy, John Burge, was torturing Lincoln Battery terminals to people.
Yeah, I saw that. They freed all these people.
Mm-hmm. No, they didn't execute all of them, but they didn't free all of them either.
Oh.
But they did a moratorium on the death penalty because of that. Because it's not isolated to Chicago either. This is something that went on.
Yeah,
matter of fact,
I believe that.
They sent my trial out from Chicago. This happened in Chicago, but they sent it out to Bridgeview because they have a 99% conviction rate of black people.
In Bridgeview.
So they were like, once you go there, you know you're never coming out. You're going to get convicted, period. And that's the thing. And my case just happened to go different from everybody else's case. Even the night that they arrested me, there must have been a good 3,000 black people and like 3 white people who were stealing like copper from inside of somebody's house. So that was the only like white dots. Everybody else was black. They caught me urinating in the hallway somewhere, and it was just like ridiculous stuff. But it's an industry that keeps them with jobs. They have to get bail bonds from jobs.
And then
judges.
this thing, oh gosh, it's just too obvious to be true that black people, especially black men, were brought over to be enslaved, work in the fields, and now that those jobs are no longer there, it's no point in black men being in America. That certainly seems to be, or at least they should be locked up if they're there. Oh.
Since slavery has never been abolished, it's just we have to wait till due process of law before you work for free.
Gosh. Well, anyway, okay. And now, have your friends or relatives visited you since you've been here? Yeah. Okay.
My mother comes yearly. We still do the
okay.
journey. My father, last time he was here was, I want to say, 07 or 08, and my sister around the same time. But I have a website where I teach African languages, so I always have students, like, just about every month. I got one who's here.
Coming over here?
Yeah, who'll come over.
Okay. Okay, well, now that I know your website, I was trying to find mine when I took that 6 weeks course, and I came across it. It's called Itaki. I don't know if you've seen that one. But at that time, they didn't have Tree. And so I asked them, I said, could you do Tree? They said, well, we'll try to find someone. I checked on the other. They hadn't found anyone yet, but now I don't have to worry about it. Okay, and have any of your relatives or friends moved to Ghana, because of you?
Well, some friends have moved here, like mainly students. I know some of my students who have moved here.
Students.
Tree students who I've taught online.
I'm sorry.
Tree students who I've taught online who have since moved.
Who were not Ghanaians.
There's one brother who is in Kumasi. Actually, he's now between Kumasi and Liberia. He married a Liberian sister. When he was based here, he was doing gold. Another brother and we went to Morehouse together. Another one who went to Morehouse with us who also was working in gold. And now he's doing real estate and construction equipment, like the excavator type of equipment and stuff.
Okay, and so I was going to ask you, but I know the answer. How often do you return to the U.S.? No, you don't return. Do not. Okay. Are you a member of any organizations in Ghana?
Yeah, Professionally Linguistics Association of Ghana, and then I just joined African Studies Association of Africa, and then in the past I've been a paying member of African American Association of Ghana. I've gone to Ghana Caribbean Association.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. It's still going on.
Yeah, it's still going, but I don't pay it either. On my father's side, my ancestors came to the Caribbean. On my father's side, so his mother was out of Barbados and his father was out in St. Kitts. And me and my wife are from the Twin Islands, St. Kitts and Nevis, so her family was on Nevis and my family was on St. Kitts.
What about you? Were you born in the U.S.?
Yeah, I was born in
Brooklyn. Your relatives are from
from my father's side. So my father was born in Brooklyn too, but his parents, his mother's side, Barbados, his father's side.
Oh gosh. Well, now you just hurt me. Because I'm like, oh shucks, I thought you were a bona fide African American from 400 years who had learned Akan, Twi, Yoruba, and was into the
African anti-American.
Right, you know what I.
So my mother's side is from the U.S. You know, for however many.
Your mother's side is your father is from the islands, okay, but your mom is from the U.S.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that her ancestors were enslaved in North Carolina, in Johnston County.
Yeah.
And they traced it back to the early 1800s, so a little bit after the Revolution, the American Revolution. For undergrad, I had a teacher who had us do our family history, our family genealogy. So we would go to the archives and, you know, find the counties that they were born in, find the birth records, and all those things. So we were able to get back.
You were?
Yeah.
How far?
That's what I said, to 1804.
Okay.
To 1804. So
1804. Oh gosh, I was only able to get back to 1850. Now, maybe then I just stopped, because our family myth was that my grandmother's grandmother was the last of the Africans in our family. But then we found out that that wasn't true. She had been probably born here too.
Yeah. Actually, I just stopped. I think my aunt, it was part of the course, and that's as far as I went to in the course, and I never got back to it. But my aunt has a lot more of the rich history, but she doesn't like sharing that information because we worship our ancestors, according to her, and she's a staunch Christian. So she doesn't want us to have any other information about these
Venerate.
ancestors.
I always tell my students, venerate the ancestors,
Tell
not
her that.
worship.
Tell her that. Idol worshiping, ancestor worship. What y'all doing over here?
Oh gosh, you need to go back to the AAG sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, I went there.
I mean, not
ago.
that you want to be. Oh, did you? Okay,
Yeah,
because
they had a thing at, you know, behind Du Bois where the
under the
diaspora,
neem tree.
No, not under the neem tree, where the Diaspora African Forum is on the other side of that wall. They had a thing where.
Oh no, yeah, Dr. Bennett. Yeah, I don't know where that is.
It's right on the other side of the wall. So if you see the neem tree, and you go
the
around the wall
house
to the restaurant is. It's on the other side there.
Where the restaurant is. Yeah, on that side.
So here's a wall that separates where the restaurant is, and then here's where AAAG meets, and this is where the Du Bois Center is, the mausoleum.
Okay.
So here's that wall. If you go to the other side of the wall, you'll see all the rest of it. Okay. So there's a Marcus Garvey Guest Center here. There's a Diaspora African Forum. They have a stage where they do different events.
I've seen the stage. Yeah.
So that's what it was.
Okay then.
So that was a good couple weeks ago.
Yeah. We were there last when they had we weren't here and we weren't in Ghana yet for the memorial for Maya Angelou. I think we were in Nigeria, but we had one of the Under the Neem Tree events, and it was just great because there were so many people from, folks who had left the U.S. in the 1970s, moved to Tanzania, now live in Liberia, the whole thing, and just hearing these experiences was really nice.
What my wife is doing now, she's doing it for Ghana Caribbean, but she's interviewing some of these people who are like in their 80s and 90s who moved over, during Kwame and Primus time, or even before that time, businesses and things like that.
Oh, okay then. So that's basically, right now, mine is just a convenient sample. Just people of the African diaspora who are now living in Ghana, who basically have moved to Ghana, not just visiting,
You're looking for people who are
eventually
born and raised in the U.S.?
No, it's the Caribbean as well. I have, 2 people from Jamaica that I'll be interviewing, but it's just to get an idea of people's stories and experiences now, But yeah, eventually I would like to just branch out and do more. But right now there's not an age group, like I say, a convenient sample.
Yeah, so on my mother's side, like when you say she was born in Harlem, and the people from the South who moved up to New York, they went to Harlem. The people from the Caribbean who moved to New York, they went to Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
So I was born in Brooklyn, but you can see both sides of that.
Okay. I didn't realize that myself.
Oh, yeah.
Even though, not quite Colin Powell you know, he grew up in Brooklyn, and then my
Brooklyn
best
is
friend
very Caribbean.
from graduate school is from Guyana, who was from Brooklyn, but I just didn't put that together.
Like, if you say, "Oh, I'm from Harlem," you say, "Okay, what part of the South did y'all move from?"
Okay.
If you say, "I'm from Brooklyn," what part of the Caribbean did y'all move from?
Okay.
So, like, for me, it's like both sides of it. So, when Harlem and Brooklyn come together, it means that you got both sides coming together.
Yeah.
And my father's side, I mentioned it before, his grandfather moved up and was part of UNIA with Marcus Garvey.
Right.
My mother's side, this is an interesting story. Her grandfather had to move from the South on the Underground Railroad.
Oh gosh,
because he beat up a white boy. They knew that he would be lynched, so they took him up to Connecticut. And actually, he and my great-grandmother, they lived in the same town, but they both ended up going to Connecticut for different reasons. So she went to help out around the house with her family who had moved up there, and he went up there to escape being lynched from beating up a white boy. And then they met again up there, but they were from different sides of the track in the South, in North Carolina, where her side was the well-to-do side, his side was like, y'all.
And they never would have gotten together down there.
They would not have gotten together down there, but then they rekindled whatever distant eye, whatever I saw you.
That's cute, yeah. Okay, let's see. Any other, organization, mostly professional organizations, okay. And
at one point I was financial secretary of AAAG.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you know Masao and Janet? Masao, Merrill?
Yeah, they have the Sunday File.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I saw Janet coming back from South Africa.
Okay, then,
She does the United Way and National
Right,
Party.
we were just out there. We were talking to them on Saturday,
Yeah.
and they're very interesting group. Yeah.
We were on the same plane coming
okay.
back. And I had another friend who ended up he was Ghanaian, but he lived in the U.S. for like 30 years and came and was the head of United Way for a while. So I knew Janet from AAAG, but then I knew her again from the United Way thing.
Okay.
And then I host their website and all that for United
Oh,
Way.
do you? Okay, then. Okay, and my next question you've already answered. Do you consider yourself an expatriate of X? Or do you consider yourself an expatriate of the U.S.?
I see myself as a former expatriate of Africa, and now a repatriate to Africa.
Okay. All right. What nationality are most of your personal friends?
Oh, do I have friends? That's a good question.
Like Mike's husband, he said, "No, I only have associates."
Yeah, something like that. Mainly associates or students or teachers or something like that. But, the people who I interact with the most are in the context of what I do. So I teach capoeira, and most of I can't say most, it's like split. I have people from the diaspora who come, and then I have Ghanaians who come as well.
Okay. And how's the capoeira class going?
Oh, it's small, but it's good. We have a core group of people. And like for us, we do it as a martial art. So because we go pretty hard and we're pretty rough,
I like it as a dance.
Yes, I hate it as a
yeah,
dance.
well, the boys did it. We offered it 2 summers, and it's interesting. All that jumping around there. The kids were intrigued and everything, and the young man who taught it was from Brazil, and he was very good. And they actually have a school that's based on capoeira in a middle school in Gainesville, which is just just amazing to me. But that's good to know.
We taught at some of the schools in Chicago too. We had about 5 different schools that we taught in capoeira at. So
I was so happy to hear about that. I just found out about it maybe like about 5 years ago because my grandson was taking Taekwondo, and so it was very interesting, and my daughter was running all around Virginia, Maryland, D.C. area, with all these competitions and everything. You go there, and it would be all these white kids and Koreans, just Koreans, and I was just like, there must be something.
That's what it should be.
Yeah, I was like, there must be something in Africa, that is comparable. And then, I was like, that is just good, and I'm glad to see that it's getting more, popular here. But it's a little, it's a little more all that jumping up and down movement.
We don't do much jumping. We do fighting, and the jumping isn't very helpful for fighting.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, I guess maybe this was more like the entertainment version of it.
That's what it is. You have people who do it like for demonstrations and things like that. You have people who do it as acrobatics, people who do it as a game, people who do it as a ritual or whatever.
Oh, okay then.
And then you have people who do it as a fight. And that's what, it was used as a fight. It was used in war. It was used on the streets for street combat.
Yeah, but I like the sort of the peacetime use of it. I hate guns. When you said you were in this survival group, I can totally understand that. I can, especially a black person in America, knowing how to use guns properly. Yeah. But I just hate guns. But let's see.
Yeah, I'll get you a laser.
Okay then.
Right.
I could use that one. How would you define the African diaspora?
African people, wherever we are located in the world.
And African people are what? I'll just ask you wherever. Who are African people?
Right. I would say there are three major components: genotype, phenotype, and also you can say a mental component of identity or self-identification, things like that. So the genotype would be to your DNA. I think it's a combination of the three, not necessarily one out of the three. So the genotype would be your DNA that can be scientifically traced and all this type of thing. Phenotype would be, primarily skin color, hair texture, nose, all those things. But that's very much related to the phenotype the genotype, that if you have this African blood and ancestry, then that's going to show up to whatever degree and what you look like. And then also the more mental aspect of self-identification and identity as an African person. You can have somebody who fits the genotype and fits the phenotype, but they're in Paris eating caviar and talking about my medieval ancestors from whatever, Paris.
And what about non-blacks? What about whites?
No. Yeah, I have a cutoff point of a good probably 100,000 years. If you left that long ago, no. You don't qualify. So if you went through a worm glaciation period, no.
The Africans who say they are an African people. African people.
They're Africans.
So do you see yourself as part of the African diaspora? I know it sounds like it, but really, now you're repatriated, so do you see yourself still, I'll just insert that in, a part of the African diaspora?
I see myself as African, wherever I happen to be located. So when I was in the diaspora, I saw myself as an African who was located in the diaspora.
Okay.
Now that I'm here, I see myself as an African who is located in Africa.
Okay.
So even, to me, the less divisions that I self-identify as, the better. So to go to the U.S. or North Carolinian or Brooklyn or whatever, it's like all of that is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. I know. I'm still holding on to my Texas
on the other side
identity.
To say, all right, y'all are Ghanaian. It's like, even what is that? You can have whatever official passport, but in terms of how do you self-identify and how do you see yourself, what's the point of, what's the point of that?
Have you done a DNA thing?
No.
Okay. Want to? No. Care about it? Okay. I mean, you already know that you are.
Yeah, I know that I'm African. And actually, I see that as being, to some degree, especially a lot of people from the diaspora see it as, I wish I can trace my roots down to a specific place. For me, I see that as our greatest strength, because here on the continent, people see themselves as whatever their fragment is. And, you know, to get even a person to say they're Ghanaian is only during the World Cup. Other than that, I'm Asante, y'all are Ewe, even within the Asantes, these are the people from Bantamans. And to me, it's so ridiculous. So the strength that we have over there is that, and that's even why you see Pan-Africanism as a movement there. That's why you see all these types of things, because once you have any level of sense, then you see the people in Brazil are black, they're African, and those are synonyms, even when you go to African languages. Therefore, they're my cousins. The continental Africans are black, they're African, therefore they're my cousins. The ones we were talking about Melanesia, Andaman Islands, you know, we're Vanuatu, wherever, we're all part of this global African family.
Well, you know, and that just makes me think about, this is sort of like a little counter to it, but when we in America and the Caribbean sort of like talk about Pan-Africanism, we're like, you know, telling African people on the continent, you know, just get rid of that, you know, the tribalism and the ethnicities and get rid of all this tribal stuff. And, you know, I remember someone didn't say this to me, but they said it in, I guess, in I don't know, a speech or on a platform. Well, it's easy for you all to say, get rid of your tribes and get rid of your ethnicities, because you don't know your tribes. You don't know who you are. And that's something that really struck me as being, I don't know, it was like, well, so maybe that's why we're talking about Pan-Africanism and unity, because we don't have an understanding of our origins and things.
You know, I actually think that that's the strength here. The fact that you have two major streams, I would say. One is cultural specificity, and the other one is cultural plurality. And I think that the strength that the diasporans bring is this cultural plurality of seeing this greater picture, this overarching worldview. What continental Africans bring to the table is cultural specificity, and that these are small nuances of how we specifically deal with governance, land tenure, you know, whatever, that it would be very difficult to be more culturally specific than continental Africans, and to come with that very fine-grained knowledge that they can bring to the table.
What you said, cultural specificity and cultural
plurality.
Okay.
And it would also be very difficult for a continental African to come with that broader worldview that a diasporan African could have. So I see both of these as being potential strengths, as opposed to, for us, we tend to see it as a weakness of, oh, I wish I could know what small fragment I come from. Or them saying, oh, you know, let's talk about Pan-Africanism, but can you even get together with your neighbor because they're from another ethnic group? So if we can bring our strength to the table and see it as a strength instead of a weakness, and have them bring their strength to the table and see it as a strength instead of as a weakness of, oh, let me try to get rid of my tribe. No, bring all of what you have.
That's good.
And I even see, like, I recommend for my students who aren't married, it would be, like, from the diaspora, it would be good if you could marry a continental African for that purpose, because you can bring this, on a very tangible level, you can bring all of this strength of having sense as a global African, and they can bring their strength of having sense as, you know, a continental African who has that specific type of root. And I see it like in the diaspora, we have a lot of the philosophy, we have a lot of the rhetoric, we have a very well-developed ideology, but very little practical skills of how to be African, in the sense of we depend on Eurasians for every single thing. If we're sick, we go to the hospital. If we're having a child, we go to the hospital. If we're hungry, we go to the store. You know, at this point in time where we are, we're not self-sufficient on just about any level, which was, again, what my parents were looking to do when they moved to the country and built their own everything. Continental Africans have very little in the way of ideology generally. If you go out and just talk to somebody and say Pan-Africanism, they've heard it in a song.
Yeah.
But like, oh, Marcus Garvey, I heard that name in a song, and that's as far as they go.
Yeah.
So they don't have much, generally speaking, in the way of ideology, but they can go out and plant some corn and make it into banku in front of your eyes. You know, they can go and do, you know, if they get sick, they'll go and drink some bitters, as opposed, and that would be their first line of whatever, as opposed to, oh, now let me go to the hospital and do
get
whatever.
Pills.
Yeah, and get pills and drugs. And just saying that to say, here it's sort of like the Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington thing of, oh, we should be all mental versus these saying we should be all physical.
True.
And
both of them are required.
Both are
that
required.
Is so true.
So imagine if you could have gotten them together at that point in time.
Yeah.
We, as a people, I say, follow Du Bois more so because you have more PhDs than ever. But how many of them can plant a pepper and make it grow?
Yeah.
And like here, if you have that type of understanding of physically this is how to do it, and people are trying to get rid of it, like in the city they're trying to be as white as possible, and that means we don't do that. So even in my household there's a woman who's like, oh, when I was growing up, because we have a garden, me and my daughter, we have a garden that we do as part of her homeschooling. And the sister's like, yeah, when I was growing up, my father had a huge farm. We did this. I was like, oh, well, you should bring your children down and have them just, you know, get in the dirt, get with the... Oh, no, I don't know. Because it's like, we need our children to be white enough to get social capital, to speak only English and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So, especially those who are in these urbanized centers are trying to get rid of that understanding of how to be African on a tangible level.
And you know, Black Americans or Africans, us, you know, really we're running away from this labor because it didn't benefit us. You know, it did not, and because we weren't doing it for ourselves. You know, so and they're like, and, oh gosh, in the way. Well, I need to go to a farm because I just hear that farmers have it so hard here. But you can just see why people are moving away from that. Even though, fortunately, I saw a couple of young men here in Ghana who have started. They're entrepreneurs, and they're entrepreneurial growing vegetables. You know, and doing it in a. They're still using their skills that they know, but also combining them with whatever the scientific knowledge they can too. So that helps. So I guess how would you define Pan-Africanism then? You know,
Pan-Africanism, I see it as the bringing together of African people under one economic system, one political system.
Is this going to ever happen?
I would say that there have been. This is the reason why I define it as such, because it helps us understand ancient African empires in that light. So when you see Kemet versus Nubia, like Kemet, they said that the word for themselves was black people. So as they're trying to expand into Nubia, they weren't interested in expanding into Western Asia initially until you had invasions from the Assyrians, Hyksos, and then we retaliated. But the early period, the goals were to bring these other southern empires and kingdoms into this one political system and one economic system. So I see that as, in that light, as the origins of Pan-Africanism. When we look at the expansion of Zulu, Ghana, Mali, Songha, Monomotapa, whatever, Kilwa, when we see them trying to expand out, what are they doing other than Pan-Africanism? At times it's voluntary, at times it's forced, but it's saying we're trying to bring...
They were trying to unite all of these groups. And they do. I'm from, you know, talking to several, this very same guy, you know, was saying that the thing he said, of course he was Ashanti, but and he thought that they were wonderful. And he said, you know, the thing that's about the Ashanti is that we feel that our culture is so wonderful, I guess, that we bring people in. If we bring people in, then we can make you into an Ashanti, and we get the best of what your skills are. I thought that was very insightful. You know, not that we push people out. And that's one thing that supposedly why Ghana has been relatively free of strife is that you know, there's a lot of intermarriage and migration. Because I remember when I first came over here, it looked like it must have been a rule. If you were a guy, you had to marry a, you know, ever you had to marry a Shanti, you know, or something like that. You do see a lot of that in, at least I have seen.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of that has to do with who's going to inherit and who do we make sure inherits what and who doesn't inherit. But yeah, it's very exogamous. So, you know, to the question of will that ever happen, without Europeans, Eurasians coming here, it would have already happened from those empires just continually expanding, and doing what we say Pan-Africanism should be: one political system, one economic system for African people throughout the continent and wherever we happen to be. So, given that there have been strides to that in the ancient past, I see also a potential of the fact that we are all the places that we are, as we can look at that as a strength. I look at it like, you know, in playing chess, if somebody takes your queen, if you don't know how to play, you're done. You resign. If you do not know how to play, you say, wonderful, this is the best setup that now I can get to checkmate. You understand?
No. I mean, I sort of understand in just a little. I know how chess works.
Right.
Yeah, but
it's that if you know,
that's interesting.
Whatever situation you happen to find yourself in is the best situation to get to your goal by taking this specific strategy. So as opposed to saying,
I like that way you phrase that. You know, instead of seeing it as a defeat, you know, once you use your queen, you've got your queen, then you've gotten to the goal.
Wonderful, I tricked you to take my queen, checkmate. So, you know, we can talk about how we were enslaved and whatever. The fact that it happened and that we are there in all these different places, and we can turn that into a strength.
I know, that's certainly a strength. You know, Janet was saying a similar thing. She said when all this travel she does, she just sees how if we could just have a sense of unity and, you know, solidarity, it would be so powerful. You know, because we're just talking about a billion, I guess, 700,000, 750,000, you know, black African sub-Saharan, I think it's almost a billion. I mean, that's a whole bunch. And then all these people in the diaspora.
Right. And not only the Western diaspora, but once we also understand the Eastern diaspora.
I know, that's what I'm looking
all
at.
All these Pacific Islands, Australia, India.
The Middle East. Yeah, it's about Middle East. Right. So, since we mentioned that, what is your views on Africans' involvement in the slave trade?
I think Africans' involvement is due to the fact of not knowing who our enemy is. And that your chess, I'm going to bring up your knowledge of chess, that Europeans, I'll say Eurasians in general, because not just the Europeans, that they had a policy. You have policies, and then you also have strategies. So their policy towards all the black people was, all of you are potential victims. So picture here, this black side of the chessboard, we see ourselves as, we're Asante. Y'all are Ewe, y'all are God. And we're seeing how to vie against each other to get a better position amongst each other. And for them, they have one policy regardless of any of that, which is all of you are potential enslaved.
That is so true.
So by us not realizing that this is a common enemy that we all have, if we understand that, and we still don't understand that, I say it's like 1471 Africans. Like in 1471, when the Portuguese came, we didn't know that they were enemies. We didn't know anything about them. To this day, we still don't know that. That means we haven't learned anything in a good 600, 500 going on 600 years. We haven't learned anything at all in terms of their nature.
That is so true. Now we should, but then, as when people say, "Well, oh gosh, I can't believe how they sold their own people."
Well, they weren't selling their own people.
They weren't their own people. Right. They were totally different people. That's just like saying the Germans, they exterminated their own people, the Jews. No, they didn't see them as their own people.
And this is part of it. Like there's this book.
But the Europeans saw them as their own people. Once they got weak, then they didn't care what you were. You know, you were fodder for the slave ship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that this guy, what's the name? Michael Gomez has this thing, exchanging our country mass of that process of being on the ships. It basically turned us from being these, you know, individual ethnic groups to now all of us are one thing. If
That
this
is so
person's
true.
getting beat, then we see them as this is my black brother who's getting beat. And it also helps us to understand how in certain places you can see Yoruba, retentions, cultural retention, spiritual system.
Oh, yeah.
It's like these are the last Africans who are coming. So yeah, we were Congolese before, but we just want to know, oh, you just came from Africa? Tell us more about being African, because we're seeing ourselves just as that, as we're all African people. So for the Africans' involvement at that point in time, we didn't have Africans, like that concept wasn't there.
Even black wasn't a concept.
Right.
Yeah.
And to come to, like, this is something that I've been thinking about recently, like the origin of the term African in terms of phenotype, genotype, and then also some type of mental understanding, that the definition of how people in ancient Kemet saw themselves was the equivalent of what African means to me today. So it's phenotypically they see themselves as black. So when they represent themselves in the pictures and in writing, they will show themselves as black. When they represent the Nubians further to the south, they represent them wearing the exact same cloth, with the exact same hair, the exact same dark skin, and they're showing themselves as the exact same thing culturally, phenotypically, etc. But then when they're showing the Western Asian, they're showing them as what we would call today Arabs, Turkish, that type of look. And then also those who are further to the west in Libya, they showed them as being distinct, but also showed them phenotypically as being like those same type of Arab, whatever.
Well, what about was there at that time relationships, communications with the Western, the blacks, the Bantus that were if they were Bantus with Kismet? Give me the date on that.
Of
is
what?
that Kismet? That is when? Is that
Kismet.
BC? Nubian? Is it around the Nubian time? I mean, we're talking about BC 80.
Oh, Kemet.
Yeah, okay, yeah, Kemet.
Yeah, this is the unification of the two lands happened about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. So this is Narmer, aka Menes.
3,000. Okay.
So, but you had, that's the start of the dynastic period, but then you had the pre-dynastic period where the two lands were separated. So the foundation of Kemet as one country is traced to when they both came under one rule, and that's where.
No, the reason I was looking at how large was their geographical sphere.
It pushed between different cataracts at different points in time. So when you look at Kemet, you're going from the Nile where it empties out. This is after unification, because before that you had upper and lower separate.
So that's too far away to get to the so-called Sudanic.
No, that came to part of it.
In what is now West Africa.
No, not West Africa. So there are several different things, like going into much more ancient history. You have before the Sahara became a desert, and it's interesting. There's an oral history amongst the people of Congo, so-called Bantu people, of when they migrated away from the Sudanic region before it became a desert, and they called the place Kayinga, and there's still a place there near Lake Chad called Kayinga to this day. And they say that they used to be there. This is their oral history, and it's like how far back do y'all remember? They say, it used to be very lush, very plentiful, very much green, but then it started to dry up, and once it dried up, we said, let's go. That's their direct quote. We said, let's go. So we left Kayinga, and then we came to the forest belt. Then we penetrated the forest and came to the Congo River, and that's where we decided to set up our kingdom. So this is going back, some of the climate people, they say that time where it started to change may have been about 10,000 years ago, the last time you had major rainfall, and that also was one of the things that made them push back the date of the Sphinx, that they were saying, it's probably coming from Khufu, Khafre, that time where the Great Pyramids were built. But in excavating around it, they found a lot of huge water damage, like floods came by this thing. Like, well, how could it have been in this period? But then you have flood waters that have eroded it down. You have to push the date back much further beyond that. So to come to Kemet's role. Okay, we went from the role in the slave trade to now we started talking about Kemet. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're talking about the concept of African,
Uh-huh.
the concept of being African.
Right.
So, like for people of Kemet, I would say that their definition of what Kemet is sufficiently inclusionary of who I would define as African today, and exclusionary of those who I would not define as African today. There's a proverb of Denchem te said on dane no matter how long a log stays in the water, it doesn't become a crocodile. So these Arabs, the Dutch Boers, all of them we need a definition that excludes them, regardless of how long they've been imperialists and invading.
The concept, what we see as empire, the British Empire stretched all over the world. But as I showed the geographical pictures of the Roman Empire, the big Roman Empire, it basically was just right around the edges of the Mediterranean. Same thing, maybe the Persian Empire was a little, wider, So, really these so-called empires were relatively small geographically. If we're talking about around the Nile, even though the Nile is long, that geographically they don't extend that far. So I guess, and I'm part of this textbook chapter that we're writing on for human geography. I want to do the geography of Ghana from a global perspective. Is looking at the history of Ghana, which from the very beginning when the first people were here, and this and that. So, okay, you haven't considered moving back to the U.S. And your views on Africa's involvement in the slave trade was basically because they didn't understand
that up to this point in time, African people need to know that Eurasians are their enemy, period. That Eurasians, and that includes everybody along that whole Europe and Asia, that these are our enemies and they have one policy in relationship to us.
Yeah.
That in terms of strategy, they say, okay, for strategy we see difference. So that means if you're Asante and y'all are Ewe, then for strategic, that's where I see you all as different.
Yeah.
But in terms of policy, we have one policy towards all of you.
Yeah.
That we need to adopt a similar thing of, we have strategy. Like if you look at Eastern Europe, that place is very ripe for white-on-white confrontation, going back from Germans, going to Napoleon, invading Russia, the Balkanization after World War II, World War I, all of these things. That at any point, what's going on now in Ukraine, like for strategy, we can say we can play all of those against each other, but in terms of policy, and see that y'all are different, but in terms of policy, we need to say all of you all are the same, and therefore we need to have a unitary goal in terms of how we deal with you all. Until we are able to come up with an understanding that even if it's only for the purpose of uniting against a common enemy, that we need to come to some level of understanding, but we need to come to that understanding. Otherwise, we're in the exact same position as we were in 1470. But we have the benefit of we could learn something from all that time and at least get that lesson because it's still going on right now. But now we're saying, oh, but Chinese are our friends now. Now we're saying, oh, should we go to China or the West? Without understanding that this is all one landmass, and in relationship to us, they have one policy. They have different strategies, but they have one policy in relationship to us.
I think maybe the Chinese or Asians, well, anyway, I think we sort of created these. What is Asia? What is Europe? And well, we know Europe is basically white people, and Asian are non-whites. And I just wonder, so could they possibly have a different black strategy other than conquering? I mean, I don't fault anyone wanting to conquer and get resources if they can. But is it possible that whites have a sort of, they're such a minority in the whole world, and they're so different that they are different from the rest of humanity. So therefore, our relationship with non-whites who are not blacks could possibly be from a different perspective than with whites just themselves, the whole white culture.
To me, we keep looking for allies other than ourselves, and we need to stop that, because no one has our best interests at heart other than us. Even if we are hesitant to say that they are our enemies, at the very least we can say they don't have our best interests at heart. So if you have a Chinese child who needs to be fed and an African child who needs to be fed, the Chinese adult should feed the Chinese child.
Oh, yeah.
And the African should feed the African child. But what we do is we say, let's feed the Chinese, and whatever is left, maybe we can find some. That this is an evil thing to do, So in the sense of, at the very least, we can say that they don't have our interests at heart. We should not be looking out for their interests.
I don't think we necessarily have to be a relationship with people is to have our interests at heart, because the way I see it, people should have their own interests at heart.
But we don't do that.
Yeah,
that's
the thing.
And because we're looking for other people to ally with.
Yes.
Let's say let's ally with the Chinese. Let's ally black and brown people.
We're looking for friends.
We're looking for
other
friends.
people are not looking for friends.
So here again, the chessboard analogy. Here we have all these black pieces. We're looking over there saying, well, maybe the rook is good. This is the whole thing in the U.S. They talk about the good white people.
Yeah.
That's a cool white boy. That's a cool white. That's what we're doing. We're trying to find the cool Chinese. We're trying to, the Indo-Europeans, the Aryans who came and enslaved and did all this horrific stuff to the Dravidians and are still doing it to them. We're trying to see, well, maybe there's a good one. And I'm saying that this, to me, based on history, is not an intelligent thing to do. That we're still looking for black and brown pride. Let's all unite. And instead of looking all over these places for allies, John Henry Clark said it best to me. He said, when we number over 1 billion people on the earth, who do we need to ally with other than ourselves?
Yeah.
So if we're looking at African people in UK, in France, in Melanesia, in Brazil, in the US, in the Caribbean, why are we still trying to find a cool white boy? Why are we still trying to find, well, maybe these Asians are going to help us out or whatever?
And the answer to, so why should we be looking in Melanesia for allies? Because, as you said,
well, those are African people.
Because
when they're African.
when the sides are drawn, we are seen as being all one black mass of people.
Exactly.
So yeah, and we're the only ones who don't see it.
And we encounter the same thing everywhere on the planet. Whether it's the Philippines, what is this place? This
yes.
Have you seen this? The Coconut Revolution. It's the black people down in this tiny island down here in the Pacific.
Papua New Guinea.
No, it's not. It's not Papua New Guinea. It's it's escaping me. But they fought off a huge corporation that was mining their island. Then they fought off the Australian government, then the Philippines, and all these folks. And they did it using coconut oil to fuel the machines that they were confiscating. It's not Fiji. If I type in Coconut Revolution, it'll come and I'll kick myself for not remembering what it was. But these are black people, and they were being oppressed by the same corporations, by these Australian government. If you look at India, I remember when Runoko Rashidi, the one who I mentioned before, he used to always send emails that this week another woman was burned alive for her shadow touching the shadow of an Aryan, Brahmin, whatever. That every place we go to the same thing. So, but if we say let's ally, and that's what the people in India were saying, they banned Runoko from going to India again because once he came there and was sharing this information about these African people all throughout the world, they started up this thing, the Dalit Panthers, like the Black Panthers, and they're saying we should fight for the Coconut Revolution.
Well, actually, this is when I was in the 6th grade. I was just listening to how the Jews had been done. And at one point in time, I was just like, the Jews used to be black because it seems like throughout their history, they have been persecuted. So they must have been black at one point in time.
Well, they have this thing, the African Hebrew Israelites. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah. I met a couple of them here. And and because of them, I just went and read something about them, how they went to Israel and then they, kicked them out of there and they came basically to Ghana.
Yeah, a lot of them are here in Ghana. And one of the things is that when, initially they didn't give black people the Bible because they said if you convert to Christianity, then you have to be set free. Then this guy, Charles...
Who said that?
That was the policy. That reduced to servitude all infidels, that was the papal bull or whatever. So they said in Portugal you have the East, Spain you have the West, and anyone who is not Christian, you can enslave them. So part of it was that once you become Christianized, then you're no longer a candidate for enslavement. So that was part of the reason why initially African people in the U.S. and different places, they weren't given Christianity because we need y'all to be enslaved. If y'all become Christian, then but then you had this great awakening, this guy Charles Colcott Jones, who said, no, we can free them spiritually without freeing their bodies. So once black people, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I'm just listening to you. And I was reading the book on the 300 years of the Dutch in Ghana, and there was a black bishop in the Netherlands who basically that's what he said. Bougainville.
Yeah, that's the name of the island. Coconut Revolution.
Bougainville.
Yeah, that's the name of the island.
How's it spelled?
Bougainville.
Oh, that's like bougainvilleas, the flower.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Oh gosh.
But you have to see that documentary. It is so inspiring how they defeated one of the largest mining corporations on the planet and then defeated the government of Australia. One of these,
Coconut Revolution.
Coconut Revolution. Indonesia, like all these other countries who were like, they're going to come and do all this stuff.
And I hope they succeed, because
they won.
Haiti.
They won. They kicked them out.
Haiti did that, and Haiti's still suffering from that. I know they are
That's
still
because
punishing.
white people have a very long memory, and part of their long memory is that they can allow no example of African people to succeed. 200 years ago, 300 years ago.
That's so true.
Kemet, that's one of the reasons why they need to make sure it's white, because they have to make sure that there's no example of African people succeeding.
I mean,
because
what's the
once
point
we
in
know
all
that,
it's like Rodney King said, can't we just all get along in this world?
No, we can't. Because
why not?
As long as they exist, we can't.
Well, my thing about them, and I mean, sort of, just sort of philosophical, is that, how we, black people, African Americans, we're always changing our names. We go from Afro American to Negro to black to African American, whatever. And it's really,
don't go to African American.
It's really okay. It's really white
trap.
people. If they redefine themselves right now by they calling themselves white, that means that they just can't normalize themselves with the rest of the world, because the way they look at it, they're white. Anything that mixes in with white, you can't have a white. You can have a black and Chinese and whatever, and they can be, whatever. I just think if they could just rename themselves like Caucasian or whatever, a Caucasian and a black or Caucasian and Chinese can come out as something else. Whatever it is, they could still pass themselves. They can still reproduce themselves. But right now, the way they define themselves as white, they can't reproduce themselves if the playing field is level, if everyone is equal and has equal rights. So to me, like Ringo Starr said, I know that's not a great philosopher, we move into everybody being Kofi Olay. I know that doesn't work. We've seen that not work. The reason it doesn't work was because white people are still presenting themselves as the ultimate, the highest hierarchy. This whole thing about when Brazil, a long time ago, before we came to the realization that color situation was really just race. I remember talking to Brazilians, when I was in undergraduate school, we don't have race, we just have color. Well, even then I could see if color is based on white being on one end and black being on the other. But none of
y'all colored people will be on TV. We don't have it, but...
Not even on the World Cup.
There was one sister at the very closing ceremony, and my wife was like, "This is the darkest sister I saw."
You know where she was? She was from Turkish Airlines. Remember the Turkish Airlines had this big campaign, and the women with the little red hats and the beige suits.
This was a woman who was playing the drum at the end.
Okay.
Who was this white girl? It was Wyclef, and like they had somebody else there, and she was playing the drum for the samba band at the back, and she was in the center of the shot. We were like, wow, they must have just dragged her out from a protest or something.
From protest. Yeah, that was just sort of crazy.
This is one of the challenges, because for us as African people, there's this guy, Neely Fuller, who deals a lot with white supremacy. Like, he has a whole paradigm based on this thing. But one of the things is that for their policy, they see all of themselves. They will come together when it comes against anybody who's non-white, right? But within themselves, they see all types of divisions. And I remember growing up, these white boys would call someone a Polak, and I was like, what is that? Yeah. Oh, he's Polish or whatever. Or the French, they give up. They're talking about World War II, the Vichy government or whatever. That they have these divisions, and for us, it would be in our interest to try to play those types of divisions against each other to whatever degree that that's possible. Or, you know, there's a saying, they say, let rats shoot arrows at each other. So Russia and Ukraine and Germany and Austria and Hungary, and they all want to kill. Beautiful. You all fight amongst each other. Because where the white comes in terms of operationally, is against African people specifically, and then anyone else generally, but more so African people.
Yeah, because of the big difference. I'm just saying, you know, I'm just wondering if, you know, to me it seems that if people hold on to things, it is either a biological basis or an economic basis. That's really why people, races, civilizations, cultures, armies, whatever, countries, they do things. And I'm just saying, if they did not see themselves as being this color that cannot reproduce itself without, you know, basically they will be wiped out. And that is very strong. Self-preservation is very strong. So I mean, really, if they just sort of redefine themselves, they need to be the ones changing their names from white to what, Caucasian or whatever, Eurasian or something.
This is one of the things, is that they're willing to even not be white, depending on how it serves their interests as they see it. So, you know, with the race thing, they're the ones who are now saying race doesn't exist, and who are lifting up Kwame Anthony Appiah and Henry Louis Gates, because these are the black people who are saying that race doesn't exist. That they're willing to use whatever tool that they happen to need to use in order to accomplish whatever goals that they decide they want to accomplish. And typically those goals are not in our best interest as African people. So they're willing to even discard white and become Caucasian. They're willing to do other things, you know, because if they're saying race,
they won't know who they are. Then you know, that's the problem. You know, that they're so united about being this specific race that needs to dominate other races. Others, because if they don't, then they will be wiped out. You know, I mean, I just wonder if that's a long term, in the year 2525,
you're
possibility.
You're familiar with Cheikh Anta Diop's two cradle theory, right?
Yeah.
So part of their imperative.
I read it. They came before Columbus, but not this.
Yeah, the two cradle theory is basically like an environmentally based explanation for behavior, for European behavior. So if you're in a cold glacial environment where there's very little resources, then might makes right. All the proverbs that they have, might makes right, only the strong survive, man versus nature. That's something that is very specific to where they've been for the past couple thousands and thousands of years, right? So when they come out from that, they have a specific worldview, which is very much diametric opposites as opposed to complementary opposites. So they see, here you have white and black. One has to be good and one has to be bad.
That's right. I mean, the whole Western civilization is hierarchies.
Exactly.
You
Strong and weak.
Yeah, you don't have
man and
separate
female.
but equal.
Right.
You
so
know.
if you have this type of worldview, which is very much something that has been built into them for thousands and thousands of years, now and I sometimes do this with my class, that in the European worldview, if I say man and woman, which one is good, they all know the answer. They've never taken a class on the European worldview, but they all know the answer. They say man is good, white and black, which one is good? White is good. I'm just like, how do you all know this? How do you all know this?
What do the women say?
Yeah, the women say that they know that man
good.
means good. So I'm asking them based on the European worldview, not what you think personally.
Yeah.
In the worldview of Europeans, between man and woman, which is good. Everybody knows that the man is supposed to be good. If I say blonde hair or black hair, which one is good? They say blonde is good. Blue eyes versus brown eyes, which blue eyes. And I say, you all are describing the picture that you see on the back of these chochos, that this imaginary white boy who y'all are worshiping is a composite of all what white people say is good. Yeah. And then the devil is a composite of all that they say is bad. So it looks just like everybody who's sitting here in this classroom. So this is their worldview, and it's something that's built into them. Yeah. What is happening now is that as African people are adopting European culture, religion, worldview, and we're seeing that basically Europeans or Eurasians in general, they are recreating the conditions that made them psychotic, in the sense of what made them psychotic, according to the two-cradle theory, was scarcity. That when you have scarcity, then might makes right. Only the strong survive. We kill whoever we can. That the scarcity is usually done now with economics. That you can have in Ghana or any of these countries, Congo, you have bananas on every tree. You could eat for life. You can, have contomere growing from the ground. Pineapples, you are in abundance. But here we're saying this is money, and you don't have enough of money.
The whole basis of Western economics, microeconomics, is scarcity.
Right,
it's
exactly.
Scarcity, yeah.
So now once we've convinced you that there's scarcity, now you get European behavior amongst people who, traditionally say, oh, we value collectivity and unity and blah, blah, blah. Now you have a manufactured scarcity, so now you have behaviors which are what Europeans would do.
Yeah, it's rational behavior for that particular.
If you are in an actual scarce environment,
circumstances.
But it's illusionary because you're not in a scarce environment. You have every single thing. You could build a house from mud. You can, and you don't need a heater and a furnace for it. Every single thing that you need to be self-sufficient and live in the world, you could do. However, the last time you did that, you were completely annihilated by these scarce barbarians. Yeah. So now that brings in another thing of, okay, how can we recognize that we are in abundance, but at the same time have a defense against now what we know exists, because we've learned a lesson over the past 500 years that these are our enemies.
So abundant. Well, this is just a little aside, and I just wonder, I need to go and check this out. I just was told the story of the guy who created Mitsubishi. They said he was walking, down the street in Japan, and he saw somebody drinking water out of a faucet, just a turn-on faucet. And he said, this is really interesting. That fact that it was so available. It was free, it was available. And he thought that was a very good idea. And he said, I want to create a product that's so available that it will be open to everyone. So there's a possibility of that as being a modern economic philosophy, as well.
This documentary I mentioned, Zeitgeist, they have now the Zeitgeist movement, and that's the whole thing, that money should be abolished. That, and it's a 3-part documentary. The first part I have to use.
Oh, okay then. And thank you so much for giving me your time. It's just been so interesting talking with you.
Right. But the first part of it is talking about this Christianity thing and how that's been used to deceive people. And the last part is talking about the Federal Reserve and this monetary system and, having to pay interest on the money that you print and how that's a constant cycle. And the idea is that this monetary system, the central banking type of system, is set up to create the scarcity and to create these behaviors.
It does.
So if you're able to abolish this type of system, then you could actually get some of it.
Capitalism is not a good system for civilization. Everybody's just like, if I graduate from this place, I'm never coming back here. And it took me 20 years before I joined the Alumni Association. It was really just because of Jake, you know. I mean, I've been out of school more than 20 years, but still. But he's got everybody joining their HBCU Alumni Association. You are so right.
Luckily, he ain't say nothing to me yet, because I've not set foot on Morehouse campus. You know, they told me, you know, when I was graduating, I said, I do not want to wear this gown. I'm wearing mud cloth. And that's what I did. I wore a mud cloth.
Oh, gosh.
And
You're a rebel.
Oh, I'm African.
Yes, okay.
An African anti-American. So
okay.
I do what one of us do. You don't have
to be anti-American. Oh, God. I can't just believe myself.
I have to.
Do you?
Yes, it's
very
necessary. It's necessary to know what you're for and what you're against. Yeah. And America being one of the worst criminal organizations on the face of the planet, I'm definitely against it.
Yeah.
Well, so when I graduated, everybody was like, "Oh, that's going to be a problem. Oh, you're going to have to take that off." Or blah. You know what they did? They took a picture of me after people came up to me during the graduation, like, "Oh, you have to take." They blew up a picture like the size of this whole wall and put it in the thing to be like, "Oh, we're diverse" or whatever it is. So I'm like, y'all Negroes.
See, that's Morehouse.
That's Morehouse. That is Morehouse.
Yes.
So I see Ghana as like a very big HBCU in terms of efficiency or lack thereof.
And that's one thing, you know, I used to be associate. My ex-husband was working at HBCU, and I swear, you know, I said that at that time I wasn't planning on going in academia, but the thing about being an HBCU is they run it like a little principality. Mm-hmm. I mean, talking about the Oka, you know, he is up there, and they just think you are just being done a favor to be working at this college, you know. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, you know, the whole thing, like when I think about specifically the inefficiency, I remember like going to register for our class. You'll be in a line for 3 hours. You get to the front of the line, they say you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place. You need to go to your department and get your department head to sign this thing.
Oh,
the
gosh,
department says,
yes.
no, you need to go to the administration.
And they hated students. I mean, students just were like peons. Oh, gosh, yes.
And you go to the administration building, they're like, no, you need to go to the gymnasium, get your PE signed off on first.
Oh,
and then
gosh.
after that. And then the gymnasium say, no, you're in the wrong. Yeah, this is Morehouse. Said, no, you're in the wrong place. You need to go to your dorm and then have the dorm supervisor sign off on this. And then after that, then you can start the registration process. Then you go to the dorm and say, no, you should have gone to Kilgore Hall where they're doing the registration and get in line. So then you go back to where you started off. Then you got to wait another 2 hours. You come to the front and say, oh, yes, this is the right place. And then they do. And it's like...
Yes, I can believe that. I'm surprised it's like...
Of Ghana is,
oh, gosh, yes,
the whole country of Ghana is like a big HBCU, even in terms of like the celebrities who are like, are you really a celebrity? Or is it like on campus, everybody knows that you're the one who has a Porsche car in your freshman year. And that's what makes you, it's like, it's so small. Like in the U.S. generally, unless you live in Hollywood or maybe like a certain area in New York, you don't see celebrities. Here, you walk through the Crown Mall, like the Gollywood star is like shopping next to you, and it's like, it's...
Yeah, I got that impression.
Yeah.
I mean, well, not about that, but oh gosh, you definitely, that is a perfect description. I hate to say this because when I came here, I said, how would you describe Ghana? And I know this is part of this racism turned against yourself. I was like, Ghana is run like a black country. It's like it's like African Americans are running this country. Right. But but I know it is no need for it to be like this. Well, actually, Hampton, where my daughter went to school, now she started school in 1990. So yeah, that was maybe there was just a window where Hampton was run, as far as I could tell, very, very well. Because I'd always wanted to go to Howard, but I couldn't go. And so it was my mission that my daughter was going to Howard. And but at the time, I was listening to these people. Oh, it's in a bad neighborhood. It's dangerous and whatever. It's in a black neighborhood, so naturally it was a bad neighborhood. And so Hampton, they said only wonderful things about it. And she really did have a great experience at Hampton. So I don't know her lines and stuff. I have a feeling that she probably went through all of that. But we went for Parents Weekend. It was really nice.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God, you're
My
so
parents
right.
would have thought it was nice, too, from Parents Weekend.
Okay, then. End the conversation.
But, yeah, the analogy to me is very apt. When everything I go through here makes me feel like this is Morehouse. And, Morehouse, they would be like, we're putting you through this so you'll be able to deal with anything you ever... Like, they were saying, like this is intentional. We're
I know.
intentional.
That's what I was like, I called it the crossing the burning sands. These kids, the fraternity approach, the crossing the burning sands approach to life. To get your degree, to do this and that. You have to go through this stuff. I'm saying.
And I've been here, and Legon, I feel, is like a HBCU. And I feel like the country is like a big Legon. It's like a HBCU just without a border to the campus. It's like the campus just extends all the way to Burkina or wherever it goes to.
I mean, that is so true. I see no rhyme or reason. Oh, gosh, I'll ask you this in another life and another time. But everybody says the problem with Africa is leadership. But you see so many competent, capable people. I don't understand how a whole continent cannot produce good leaders. 54 countries. And not one or two. Yeah.
They were assassinated.
Yeah.
Coup, CIA.
Yeah.
And the CIA is the one who took credit for the coup because they created a situation where, your economy is jacked up, now the people are rising up against you. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point. That's what they're trying to do in Zimbabwe. Destroy the economy. Now the people say, you're running our country bad, we're going to do a coup. But who destroyed your economy in the first place? That did it with
Well, it's amazing. He must be quite a politician, a global politician, or he's learned these lessons. Mm-hmm. Because in Mugabe, he seems like he was a pariah a couple of years ago. And now, everybody's kissing up to him. I mean, they didn't let him go to some whatever. But, U.S. companies, whatever they're having
Chinese
meetings and whatever.
The Chinese have been very big in Zimbabwe, so the West is now trying to deal with stuff.
That's probably what it is. Oh, I forgot. That's what it is. Yeah. That's what it is. That's what it is everywhere.
There was a huge ramp up in terms of what they were doing, and it was especially because they were talking about using the Chinese yuan currency because their currency was entirely destroyed. So then they were like, okay, well, let's adopt the U.S. dollar because they're not going to destroy their own currency. In terms of the dollar, we're talking about the yuan, and then I think one more the yen. Like this.
Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Mugabe, I don't know. I really don't know about him because I remember he started out as being such a good revolutionary, this and that, but it just seems like, I don't know, he's gotten older and his brain is addled. But I blame it on the fact that when his Ghanaian wife died and he married this 25-year-old, it's been the hell in a handbasket ever since,
And like for me, this whole thing about African leadership, like I don't see Ghana being run as a black country. I see it run as an anti-black country. Like just the other day we were talking about the issues here at Legon and like a lot of the backstabbing, like senior faculty who try to sabotage junior faculty and these types. And there was one sister who was like, this is typical African thinking. And I was like, no, this is typical anti-African thinking. And we need to see the difference.
Yeah, that's true, because we say that ourselves, the crab in the basket, theory.
And this is one of the things is that we see that whatever we happen to find continental
negative
Africans doing as we see it as being African. We see that, here we come to Ghana, this is what African people are doing, or this is what Ghanaian people are doing. And what we see, we need to analyze it in terms of what's the origin of it and who does it benefit. Then we can see, well, is this really African or is it anti-African? Yeah, you may happen to be continental Africans and doing this behavior, but that doesn't mean it's African behavior.
Yeah. Right.
We need to ask who taught you. Where's the origin? And or we can start off the other way. We can say who benefits from it.
Yeah.
Once we see who benefits from it, then we can go to, well, this is the origin of it, the Tutsis and Hutus and all this stuff. That you get coltan coming out of Congo for free because of that, whole thing, or the whole Eastern Congo, all this war. Who benefits from it?
Yeah.
Halliburton and all these companies.
Gosh, and I mean,
that's
the
where
Congo
we know.
is just
Well, that's
like
the source
the
of
Garden of Eden or whatever the thing is in terms of resources. It's amazing.
Whoever controls the Congo controls the world.
Oh God!
Uranium. If you need nuclear weapon, whatever you need.
Yeah.
If you control the Congo, you control the entire world.
It's just amazing.
Cell phone technology, computer technology.
When copper was a big thing, they had copper. Diamonds, they've got diamonds. Then coltan. How did they get something that the electronics industry needs?
Gold, you name whatever resource that the world needs for anything is in Congo.
And it's just been constant disarray ever since Patrice Lumumba was killed,
Assassinated by his enemies. So once we understand...
And the U.S. did own up to it,
yes.
A few years ago after he died.
Oh, yes. They owned up to Kwame Nkrumah, too. They owned France and CIA. They owned up to Thomas Sankara. They'll own up to all of this after
Thomas
the fact.
Sankara, now that was a good leader too. You're right about that.
So when we talk about, we don't have good leaders, I think about it in terms of, I remember reading Guerrilla Warfare by Che Guevara. He talked about one of these strategies that they would use is that you would have a whole file of soldiers who are coming in, and you would set up on the other side of it, so they have to pass between two trees or narrow rocks or whatever, and that's where you set up. And then what do? You just focus on whoever is in the front and shoot that person in the head. The second person will still come and will be shooting back, but then you shoot that person in the head. At a certain point, the third person is very wary about coming because he's seen what's happened to the two who came before. The fourth and the fifth, that this is how you break the morale in a very tangible way. So when you look at the first group of leaders, the best leaders Africa had and what happened to them, you can look at Amilcar Cabral, assassinated, Thomas Sankara. You can look at Patrice Lumumba. You can look at Samurai Machel. You can look at all these people who are assassinated. The plane car, whatever. Who are assassinated intentionally. So now, when you look at the leaders, who is willing to stand up and say the same things and do the same things?
But, if that's the way it's going to be done, well then... what? Then everybody's going to be assassinated. So therefore, I'm just thinking too, the leaders, they don't need to get up and grandstand. They just need to act. Just like you hear all this stuff about free trade. We have no free trade in America. There are sanctions, there are subsidies, there are whatever. So therefore, the Koreans, the South Koreans should have managed to do it. Call it whatever. Call it economic development. Call it, entrepreneurship promotion. You don't call it, subsidies or trade barriers.
That is the point of these structural adjustment deals, because once the people got into these loans in the early 80s, now you have structural adjustment, which says you have all these stipulations and conditions. You can't use it for subsidies.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, that's what I was just saying. Call it whatever. Call it women's empowerment. That's the big thing. Call it, educating children and the poor. In other words, don't just grandstand and make yourself into a target. Just sort of be smart.
Well, look at what happened to the most recent people who were attempting to do these things, and it's not a good track record for them either. Like, I'm thinking about Hugo Chavez. Specifically, that he was all about action, all the programs that he did, but he was assassinated by cancer.
But still, I mean, really, unless, we're just getting bad press. If you have all this oil coming out, why don't you build a refinery? Why are you sending your oil to Houston, Texas, for heaven's sakes? I mean, they're just what about dependency do you don't understand? Certain things like that. And I don't know. There was from what I gather, here again, it's probably skewed the way it comes out. There was a lot of welfare state, but not a productivity. Because that's one thing I say about the U.S. and our economy in moving forward after the Great Depression. As far as I'm concerned, capitalism basically died in the Great Depression. And what was resurrected was really socialism and capitalism. Because basically capitalism, the good thing about capitalism is that it's highly productive. It produces stuff. But it doesn't distribute. Socialism does. And basically that's what we have in the U.S.
But even before that, and Amos Wilson has a book, Blueprint for Black Power, and he shows all these huge land grants, even going to Louisiana Purchase and all that time of free land for white folks. Free this, free that. Then all of this is socialism. When you say, all right, you can have, 1,000 acres and it's free, that's socialism.
Yeah.
But they're saying it's capitalism. So even though they're voicing capitalism, that is very selective capitalism, because they use socialism when they want to. They use communism when they want to. They use capitalism when they want to, because they know that their goal is against their enemy. They know to destroy your enemy. And like they say, keep your eyes on the prize. Because I tell my students, that they're all little, MBA, hotshot Wall Street wannabes. And, I tell them, I said, okay, we're at this great socialist institution called the University of Florida. It's a public institution. You take from the masses, schools, and just even right now, you take them from the masses to fund them. I said, most people, because we're on a state, we don't have an income tax, so people, state tax is supported. And it being a regressive tax, it's no gradation. So that means that if you're poor or rich, you still saying 7%. So like I tell them, people who can't even afford to come to here, who can't even get into the school, they're paying for you to go to this university that you're sitting here talking about, this capitalist institution. But that's what I'm saying. I remember reading this guy was talking about it. He said, Zamora Michelle said this. He said, first of all, these capitalist socialist systems were historically based in Europe. There's nothing sacrosanct about them. And just like he said, just because you have a socialism does not mean that the state has to be selling tomatoes. I remember, that statement, which is really, basically he was saying, adapt the thing to your best interest. Just do your best interest. And we can say all that sort of thing. So I'm just saying, we just need more clever leaders. We need leaders who aren't taught by our enemies.
Well, if they're taught by the enemies, they know. They know how. That's right. The enemy's not going to tell you how to.
This is the thing. It's one thing to be in an enemy school for a specific purpose. To be a spook who sat by the door and know who your enemy is. It's another thing to be taught by your enemy and to be diseducated by your enemy, miseducated by your enemy. That this is the entire leadership that we have. This is Muhammad, this is Mills, all of these people who isn't Christian. If you are an African and you're a Christian, that lets you know who taught you and for whose best interest. The reason why you were given Christianity is to make you to make you stupid and to make you fight against yourself. So you all are saved. Here are the heathens. Go kill them for us. That's the point of it. It's not to save your soul or anything. So you have, which state has people who aren't either Christian or Muslim in the leadership? This lets you know that all of them are Eurasian slaves to some degree or another, just on that level, before you get to economics, before you get to psychology, before you get to health, before you get to all these other areas. And it even goes to the point of, we're talking about Africanizing intrinsically European systems. Who told us that that is a paradigm that we have to follow? This is all that exists. Let's just put kente cloth on it. As opposed to a paradigm of re-Africanizing, which is that we had our own something, and
so what
we can adapt
do you know George
something.
Ayitti, the Ghanaian politician? He's a political scientist, really. Political scientist. He's an academic. But he came out in this book in the 80s, Africa Betrayed, and said very similar thing. He and not like, well, let's go back and bring back the traditional system. But basically he was saying, let's just go back. We had a system. Let's just go back and look at it. It was working. Let's just see how it can. And I remember, and he really came down on these, the current leadership. He was persona non grata here. I remember I met him in 1992. He came over to to sort of look at the election. That's when they went back to the Fourth Republic, went back to democracy. And nobody would sit with him, you know, that type of thing. And he continues, you know, but basically that's what he was saying. And you know, a lot of times when people, you know, they hear this, they're like, oh, well, you know, we can't go back to the chiefs and the this and that.
You know, the point isn't going back. The
yes,
point is here,
exactly.
Here you have a stream, you have a river, and it's flowing towards the desert. And what you're saying is let's redirect the stream towards agricultural land as opposed to the desert, because that's where it's flowing to. So you're not trying to say, let's put the stream back on top of the mountain. You're saying let's put it towards a place that is
a good analogy.
Intelligent to go. Like this idea, there's this book that I have. It's called Mbongi, and it's around here somewhere. But, oh, here it is. I actually got a chance to study Kikongo language with the author. And in it, he outlines the political system of the Bakongo people and how they had several structures that, you know, famously the Portuguese came.
This is let's make it Zaire and
yeah, so it's old. You can tell it's old.
No, I'm just saying.
Right. But basically, the idea was that you had this type of hierarchical pyramidal system at one point in time, and that's how the Portuguese were able to come into Congo and King Afonso the First and all this type of thing. And you had another system which was more indigenized after that, but then it was also around the same time where you would have the centralized leadership and like concentric circles. So here you have representatives from this and representatives from that, and then you have the inner circle. So as opposed to everybody is on a pyramidal system, you have. But what he's doing is, as opposed to saying, like advocating, let's go and look at it. He's like, this is what we had, and these are the things that we should use for the.
That's exactly what he was saying, Ayiti. But basically, that we had a system, and let's just revisit. Because basically, because I used to wonder, I wondered, you know, when I came over here in the 1980s, like, how come these countries can't get themselves together? Why? You know,
wearing white wigs.
Well, that too, but this was much more, a little more basic. It's because I realized then, it's changed now because now most people in these countries accept the central government as being their government. But basically at that time, I saw that it's just like, how can they let them get away with this and they just do anything, whatever? I went to visit Anloga, and I saw the paramount chief there, who was a lawyer, college-educated lawyer, and he was basically presiding over the people come in and they present their cases and whatever. He seemed like a very intelligent person. But then I realized, because the majority of the people who still live in the rural areas, certainly then, they see that as their government system. They don't see this system, these people in Accra. Now, they do a little more now, because now they recognize that these people have the resources and they're squandering them. But it's sort of like we say in the U.S., oh, those fools in Washington. You know, I don't want to pay any attention to them. And so that, you know, it's just like, that even is more of a reason to look at that system, because a majority of the people still adhere to that system, and we're constantly undermining it. You know, and now the chiefs, everybody says, oh, they sell land 3 or 4 times or whatever, but they don't have others, and I'm not that they should, but they don't have other sources of income, and they have to have. You can't be a chief with no resources. You know, the gold is taken away to some company, the diamonds go to the government. You know, even the cocoa, you know, it's extracted and they give them whatever. You know, so they no longer have that resource base. So they're being constantly undermined on the one hand, but on the other hand, at least spiritually, conceptually, people still see that as their government. And so I think there's less pressure on all the ministers of parliament, whatever, because people basically don't expect much of them, you know, unfortunately.
And like on the same topic, this is also one of the reasons for the battle for Kemet, ancient Egypt, is because as we are questioning why are we Africanizing these European concepts as though we didn't have anything, is that we actually have documented resources and writings about this is the way that we did it. This is how the land tenure system worked. This is how the governmental system works. So if we want something, like even to go to these places in the rural areas now, none of these places are untainted, quote unquote, by all of this. You know, we got to sell all this to get money, and we're hustling.
Right.
Like, just about most of the things that people say is traditional is from a specific period of enslavement. So people say you need to bring bottles of schnapps. Okay, since when? What was being done in 1300? Was it schnapps?
Schnapps?
Yeah, you got to bring
peppermint or whatever. You got to bring two bottles. That was interesting.
And they're saying this is tradition.
Yeah.
But coming from where we come from, we know that this can't be tradition going back. People here don't have a concept of time in that sense to know that it can't have existed before Europeans came. The beads that they have are Italian beads.
Yes.
So it's like we know logically how time works. That this can't have been tradition before the Italians brought it or whatever.
Exactly.
Or it was brought by the Portuguese.
The people down in South Africa and the guys, the Maasai. I mean, those beads that they have, those plaid red cloths, they look like they're from Scotland.
Right.
You know, so that's
so when
so
people
true.
are saying this is traditional, logically, whatever liquor you're using, you say it can't have been traditional before 1471.
That's true. Schnapps. Just
so
a name.
Once we come to that and we say, well, what were we doing before that? That's where we value this type of information, and that's where we value what was written down in Kemet, because that says this is how we did it. So if we're looking for an African system to adapt and redirect the stream away from the desert, then we can say, well, this is how we want to redirect it. This is how we want to re-Africanize it. Means here's something that was already African. Here in this context, it may have become very European, and now we're saying we should redirect it towards something that, when it was African, it was supposed to benefit. I'll talk about this in terms of like the festivals. The point of the festival isn't sing, dance, and blah. There's a political economy of it. So the festival, the palm wine tapper gets financially enriched by that. The one who's carving the drums, the blacksmith, it's basically an economic endeavor that enriches everybody in the society. But now when you go to a festival, it's schnapps. That's Holland is getting the money from that. You know, you get the white cloth, which is coming from France or wherever it's coming from. Like every single thing that you do to say you're traditional is coming from somewhere else. Even the brass band is playing. And where are those instruments? That the only people who get enriched by the festival is Europe, because everything you're saying is traditional comes from Europe, the beads or whatever. But if we're saying that we want to go back and look at what we were doing before that, the point of it initially, the principle of it is we should enrich ourselves by these things. So now we say, well, now even if it's something that looks quote unquote modern, we should go back to what that original principle was. This phone is RLG, it's made by Ghanaian people. So in the sense of this is something that enriches all these indigenous people by doing it, that's more traditional than the festival y'all are doing. Even though it looks modern, this is keep holding on to the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. Here we're drumming and dancing, but it's none of it is to serve African people's interests.
I remember when I first came over here and saw those wax prints. They were from Holland. They not even said Velasco. Holland prints. We keep making them different and whatever. So, well, at least Kente seems to, you know, that's one thing, thank goodness, that they resisted Korean print Kente. They tried to, you know, to bring that, I know, in America. How would you describe your quality of life in Ghana?
Is this for the quality of life study?
No, actually, I was thinking of that just in general.
You know, one of the brothers who I said I went to Morehouse with, who repatriated, he said something that I thought was very profound. He said, what made him decide to repatriate, it was when my wife went back and I was on the beach with my girlfriend, a Fanti girl, jet black, beautiful sister, and I was just coming from capoeira class. I had my beer and bottle, so I was playing the instrument there, and we were on the beach sipping coconuts and all this, and he was just like, I'm moving. That image, and within 6 months he moved and has never lived back there again. But he said this is what it must feel like to be a white person in America. to go through the stores and you don't have somebody following you around because you're black, because everybody's black. You know, like this type of thing. And when I felt that was when I was driving, and I did not have my heart jump through my chest because I'm worried about, are the police going to pull me over and beat me up or whatever they're going to do, or trump up a charge or whatever. Now in the U.S., they'll do a thing for black men especially. They'll drive behind you for 3 miles, and then they may pull you over, they may turn off.
I know.
But during the entire time that you're there,
you're
this
terrorized.
is a life. This is a year of life that's off of your life from this experience, the stress. Every single corner you turn around. I remember like driving from North Carolina up to like D.C., especially in Virginia. They have these like little driveways in between the different sides where you can make a turnaround. They wait in these turnarounds. There's speed traps, and you're driving. You pass by one, and it's this whole thing. And here, the freedom of not having that feeling happen ever is the most invaluable thing that you can imagine.
Well, that's good too, because in Ghana, you know, you hear so much about in Africa. They have these awful policemen, and they'll do this. Which some places they do. Yeah, but I remember when I was here in the 80s, when we were over here, and I had to. This is what just really endeared me to Ghana. I was going to pick up my daughter at some party. The parents would always, which is really cute too, because she was like 15, and you know the parents would have these things for kids because there's nothing for young people to do. Up until recently, there was nothing for young people to do in America unless they drank. But no, I'm sorry.
Is Tara green?
Oh no, that's sort of our adopted Minty daughter. Okay. Yeah. And so she was here, and they were having, parties. So I was spending my weekends, driving back and forth, between here and her. And it was like, well, it gets dark quick, but this was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And it was pitch black. And I that's one thing, the freedom from fear. Oh, that's the thing that, you're talking about the fear with the police. Freedom from fear that just because you're a woman and walking in the street in the dark or any other time that people are, that's the whole thing, is they're going to attack you. So I'm driving down the street, and I saw coming up on this one Trocho stop with these young girls, and they were dressed in some white, they were sort of traditional dress or whatever. Young girls, looked like they were maybe 15, 16 or whatever. 3 young girls. And I was like, gosh, this is just wonderful to be in a country where 3 young girls could be standing up in the pitch black waiting for a Trocho at night and not feel, afraid.
And not even know that that's something that they should feel. Yes,
that they should.
I remember the late
now
90s.
It's gotten a little bit. It's gotten a little worse now, though.
I remember the late 90s where the first armed robberies started happening. People said, "Oh, that must be Nigerians." They must be.
Yeah, I know.
It was like national news when there's an armed robbery.
Yes.
That's national news.
Yes, that's the truth.
And so now it's much different from that. But
but even
you can even see that transition from this. And I remember going to Nigeria, living there. It was like 2003, and driving at night, and it was along a highway, to whatever degree it's a highway. But we're driving, and we come upon an older woman, maybe in her 50s. She was carrying a tree on her head with a baby on her back at night. And it's like the things that when you're used to being raised over there and whatever, it's mind-blowing to you, but to everybody else this is normal.
Yeah, normal.
And that's one of the reasons why I want my daughter to be raised here, is because we took her to the Air Force here, all black pilots and whatever.
Oh yeah, when I got on, I would purposely fly Ghana Airways,
right.
And you're right, that was just wonderful, the flight attendants and whatever. And then, as I went further on, another day I was going to pick up my daughter, and this lady, I saw a lady waiting right outside the gate. And so I just gave her a ride because she was going somewhere. So as we were going down, it was after boxing, boxing day. So we were going down, and the Teddy Corsi circle used to just be a big circle. So So as we were going down there, and that was under the PNDC at the time. So they had all these, folks with their guns and whatever, little AK-47s or whatever they call them. So we go around Teddy Corsi Circle. Here's a flashlight. And so here comes this little guy, looked like he was about 17. I guess he was 18 and 19 with his AK-47 walking up there with his blue suit and whatever. And so, you had to stop. And because that was just what you did. You had to stop. So I stopped him. And, here then, I still wasn't afraid. And so, he was nice and everything. And when he saw I was American or whatever, he said, well, there's Boxing Day. Is anything you're going to give me for Boxing Day? And I was just thinking that, well, it wasn't like a bribe or anything. It was just Boxing Day. It was just like a gift in a way. And so this woman sitting next to me is going to little boy, get away. You can't be asking us for this. Get away. Oh, no, go. Keep on driving. I was just like, okay, then.
With his AK.
He just stepped back.
With his AK. Fully loaded. Oh, yes, sorry, ma'am.
Really. So, are you happy living quality of life?
Yeah, quality of life. That's one thing that I would say is very high on the quality of life, and that's an intangible I think is worth more than everything else.
And that's one of the things that when we are looking at development attributes, opportunities, income, there's a freedom from fear. Is one of the ones, and to me that is something that you definitely have. I don't care what they say about development in our $14 trillion GDP or whatever. I mean, that was just amazing, Yeah.
So that is high. Lower on the scale is water and electricity as a steady supply.
Yeah.
But, for me, because I come from a survival training background, I see it as nothing, really, because it's like I do this in the woods with a knife, and that's all I have, and then everything else
I
need, I'm living off the
land. Even and not from a survival training background, but I remember when I first came here and I was staying in Volta Hall, and we didn't have water in the hall, so you had to go downstairs in this little faucet. It was their little courtyard. So I just found myself, you put a bucket in your room, and I was going. So one morning I found myself just walking down there swinging this bucket. And I was like, dog, I can't believe it. How quickly you can adjust to things. If you're happy, if you feel good, if people are nice to you, then that just was not a big deal. Now, I say maybe, now we've been here for 2 years, and the lights go out and the water goes out and whatever. But still, that just, I would wish they would be better, and they should be better, But, those are like inconveniences. So I understand what you mean. Are you happy living in Ghana?
Yeah, I would say so. When people ask me, because they say, oh, you came from the U.S., blah, blah. Why did you come? I say, because I was looking for freedom and justice. And neither of those exist in the U.S. And, that's the little motto, freedom and justice. So I'm like, between those two things, that's the reason why I came. So because... I've felt since I've been here levels of freedom and levels of justice like I haven't felt growing up, being born and raised. And intergenerationally, like this is stuff my great grandfather having to leave the place he was born because he's going to be lynched. This is intergenerational, like my other great grandfather being part of the UNIA and what they did to Marcus Garvey. This is it's really coming full circle. It's really coming full circle. And like even my parents, their original vision was to move down to the South, into the Caribbean, into Africa, and got stuck in step one.
So where do your parents live now?
They live in North Carolina.
Oh, they're in North Carolina. Yeah.
When you build your own house with your own hands.
Oh gosh, they did that. Wow.
They were in the newspaper and all this.
Oh,
Brooklyn couple, they sold their, what do they call
it? Thought they were immigrants. Immigrants from New York, because you know how the North and the South.
That was brownstone. They sold their brownstone house, came down with chainsaws, cut their logs, and put them together.
And how old were you?
How
old were you when they did
I was 1 when they first moved down,
okay.
and we all lived in a house about the size of this, and Dr. McNair's office. We didn't have water, we didn't have electricity, and we were the happiest children on the face of the planet until I went to public school. And I came home one day, I said, "Are we poor?" You understand? Like, all I remember was happiness until public school.
And you hear people in the kids in the U.S. say that too. That adults say, "I didn't know we were poor until I grew up."
Right. And somebody said something about my shoes because they weren't real Nikes or whatever. And I was like, "Oh," and they said, "Oh, this is expensive, and you must know." And I was like, "Oh, dang, we must be poor." And this is the created scarcity. This is the illusion.
Oh, gosh. And we fell into this trap with our grandson. Here I am waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go find whatever the Air Jordans are. They were killing people over in Maryland. So in Gainesville, it was just a little easier. But, I mean, that is just, I think that is so awful. You talk about they make, 150 of them and know that there are 1,000 people looking for them. Oh, gosh.
This is what Amos Wilson, the psychologist who deals a lot with economics as well, these created tastes and desires. And going back to the instructions of Ptah-hotep, this is the oldest book in the history of humanity, Instructions of Ptah-hotep. There's a precept that he says that one who obeys his belly belongs to the enemy. So once they've created these tastes and desires for these things that are absolutely worthless, now they can manipulate you in order to fulfill those tastes and those desires. Whether it's in terms of the food you eat, whether it's in terms of the clothes you wear, whether it's in terms of the drugs that you need, whether it's legal or illegal drugs, that once you're controlled by those tastes and desires, then it's a wrap.
Yeah, that is so true. Let me just... Okay, and you say you're happy. Living in has Ghana met your expectations?
I expected every single thing that I've lived here before, so the good and the bad, I expected every single thing that I've come in touch with. Because I left here when I was doing study abroad, like, this is an HBCU away from an HBCU.
Well, I had heard so many stories about African Americans who'd come over here and, since they weren't welcomed, hey, you're back after 400 years, welcome back, brother, sister. I just said whatever it was, I was going to just deal with it. And as a result of that, I just had a good experience, and the only thing now I know that I'm not going to worry about it. I'm too old to be worrying about these things. If I was younger, maybe I'd worry about it. But, I know that we are living in somewhat of a privileged, position, a lifestyle here. Then that is, I don't know. I just like this friend, Janet, and I understand what she said. She said they're very, very happy here. But she said, I didn't come over here to be a Ghanaian. I don't expect to be a Ghanaian. I'm an African American who lives in Ghana, who lives in Africa where I want to live. So,
And for me, I share a similar sentiment, except I'm an African anti-American. This is what I said, that this same teacher who taught me Kikongo, he said that the only Africans you can find on the planet are the ones who are in the diaspora. Why? Because those who are on the continent see themselves as 1,000 different things before you can even get to their country, before you can even get to their region, before you can even get to the continent, before you can get to the African world. So you're not going to find people who are African in the sense of what that means.
But I like the way you put that. But they have that knowledge of the specificity to bring.
Right. This is the thing. So when we're talking about what is it to be African in that global sense, the only people who really have that indigenously, naturally, are the ones in the diaspora. When you're talking about what it means to be African in that very minute sense, they're the ones who have it. So people from the diaspora aren't going to out-specify these, generally speaking, and those from the continent, generally speaking, aren't going to out-pluralize those who are in the diaspora. But you can find you can find Kwame Nkrumah from going there. Then you can find diasporan Africans from being here. Like me, myself, I'm quizzing continental Africans all the time, and I remember my Yoruba teacher. He would take me around to shame Yoruba people because all of them are rushing to be European, and I've mastered Yoruba after this was after like 2 or 3 years, whatever, to the point that I know all this stuff that they don't know. So he would do that to be like, like, you're ashamed or aren't you ashamed that you become so white that you don't know any of this, but here's somebody from the outside
who's making an effort to learn it.
Not just learn it, but I'm teaching them that. You see what I'm saying? They can't count to 10 in the language, and I'm telling them the figures of 1 million, whatever. We're doing our exchanges in Naira, and they can't do it in Yoruba. So like, and then especially of the culture, because they're all Christians and they've all sworn off this pagan stuff. And I can tell them all of it. So whether it's ancient stuff or whether it's modern stuff, you know, and I can give all the terminology for everything around me. I can do that. And then the stuff that they've all reproached and said this is whatever, stuff that their great grandparents knew. They don't know that. What they know is, you know, these nuances of what's, oh, this is the new dance and whatever. But, you know, again, with very few exceptions, continental Africans aren't going to be on cultural pluralism beyond rhetoric. Not like deep understanding of ideology and can create this ideology and apply it and come with the analogies and these understandings that, like, if there's anything that we have in the diaspora, we got ideology for years. We can give the lecture of the century and then we'll go to Walmart and then go eat at McDonald's after it. And you were just talking about let's get free and gave every layout reason of why the past European behavior for 500 years. And then, okay, now where we're going to get something to eat at. And here, all right, they're going to, oh, my farm is at the village. You know, I work here at Legon, but my farm is at the village. I'm going to my farm, and I'm so they can
go
do
back
that.
up because I guess you talk to. I really like to talk to Professor Wadova. He is so steeped in you know his culture, and he's you know he's educated at Oxford or wherever, but he has a good understanding and belief still. You know, in it. I mean, with critique as well as you know the good things and whatever. And I think that's what you know we African Americans need to do too. Is that you know we need to see Africa the good with the warts because either we see it with all the warts or we see it so it's idealized. And one little thing someone says against it and then it all falls apart. Right.
Yeah, so that was one thing that coming here to live. I went through that when I was here in undergrad, 20 years old, however old I was. So I came here already. Then I've been to Nigeria, been to Burkina, been to Mali, been to Senegal, been to Gambia. I had a very good sense of, you know, all the good and the bad and the in between. So, like, I remember at that time I, like, shed tears. And what I realized from that is that it was laziness. And I'll tell you what I mean. That, in a sense, we wanted and want Africa to be free. And now, if we can come to a place that's completely untouched, you know, that you know has preserved all of their traditions and has fought.
That's
and,
utopia.
That means, right? That's utopia. That means that our work is already done. We don't need to do it. Why do we even exist with whatever ideology that we have, with all of our 500, 400 years of experience that we have? Why do we exist? Or need to exist if our work is already done for us, and that's what we're looking for is our work. So now we come here and we see all this degradation. We see the white Jesus, the American flag. At the end of my,
see the joke-filled gutters and
you know, at the end of my year here for study abroad, I said I need to go back to the U.S. so I never have to see another American flag or another white Jesus. Because in the U.S., all we have is red, black, and green flag. We never stood up for the flag, never did a pledge of allegiance, never sang the national anthem, never celebrated Thanksgiving, Christmas, none of that. And then we're coming here, and then they're talking about, oh, Triple AG is doing the Thanksgiving, the giving thanks. Oh, we're doing the whatever, Christmas or whatever they're doing. And I'm like, for me to go from a place where we never do all that, now I come to Africa, and I'm seeing a white Santa Claus at the ANC or wherever I'm doing.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm like, So
that's true. And those whole pink blonde dolls. And that whole story.
So, to me, once you can see it for what it is, that lets you know what my purpose is, what my mission is.
Yeah.
And I don't need it to be utopian. I don't need it to be ugly. I need it to be that what it is tells me what the need is. This is what Prof was saying. Needs assessment is the most important step of your study.
His thing.
So now we can see all this stuff, so that lets us know where our needs are.
That's a good way of thinking. Oh gosh, and I'm glad you're at the age where you can, just go move forward on that. That is so true. Because I think, that a movie, Eddie Murphy's movie, Coming to America, I look at that. That is the way most African Americans who think about Africa at all, that's the way they would like for Africa to be.
Exactly. Rose petals.
To be basically Europe in blackface.
Right. Exactly. And that's, continental Africans, to a large degree, from not knowing history, they basically see Africa as that. Like, people, they talk about, when we were in our medieval period. And people say this, and I'm like, in your mind, you must think you had knights and castles and dragons and princess, just black versions of it. And I'm like...
Not to mention, it was just like, that's one thing when, Jake does, he's always talking about periodicity, is... the Middle Ages in Europe is not the same thing as the Middle Ages anywhere else.
And this is what people say. They will say, yes, during our Middle Ages. And I'm like, you have totally imbibed a European... This is the entire world.
The Middle Ages of Africa is probably something BC.
Yeah, you gotta go back. It's like, where are you going to say this? But they're talking about whatever. And it's like, you have taken your enemy's history to be your own history. Yeah. So once you do that, true. Everything that you do from that follows naturally. And what follows naturally is insanity. It's common, but what's common isn't necessarily what should be normal in the sense of what's sane. So.
Yeah, you're right. Your enemy's history is your own. That's why.
And that's the point.
The whole thing is. And that's one thing we were trying to do. Not just call everything pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial. I mean, it's just the whole thing. That's the center. That's how the perspective that everything. How has it kind of met your professional expectations?
My pay is less than my stipend when I was at Wisconsin.
Oh gosh, yeah.
My monthly stipend was more than my salary here.
Well, no, I don't want to ask your salary, but do you get the so-called market premium? Did they hire you as,
They hired me here as
I don't know if there is a difference.
Status, 2 years probation.
Yeah, well, that's how I was hired like that too.
Right, and they hired me at the lowest portion. They said it can be from this to this, and you get the and only dedication to say that this was what I wanted to do anyway. Because otherwise, I had another brother, we were sitting side by side at the graduation, and he's shopping around. He came out of Jamaica, did his PhD in history, and now
I think I met him. Yeah.
So, he has a different perspective on it. For me, if I was in it for the money, I wouldn't be doing anything that I'm doing. However, I'm not averse to financial whatever that comes from it, because.
But that's one thing I discovered. When I first started working in academia, that really working in academia gives you this credibility. It's like, this is your base salary, and you can do all these things from here. Like, you've already started with you get grants, you can get resources. Just like they criticize them sometimes. Gates and Cornell West and all those, they call them academic entrepreneurs. But I'm like, so what?
Yeah. And I have my own business with the language teaching. Having a doctorate along with that now.
Yes,
I got that on my site on the testimonials page. So before you get to that, you see the credentials and whatever. So, for me, the academia piece isn't the be all end all. Prof. Gordon, he was mentioning 7 Habits of Highly Effective People recently. So as he was talking about it, I was like, I had always seen that. My parents had a bookstore. That's how I got all this information about this and this small thing. But I always saw that book, but I never read it. So I downloaded the audio book. I listened to it.
Oh, okay.
Another one is Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad,
Oh,
Poor
yeah.
Dad. It's this whole series that's in that general
That's true.
genre.
That thinking, yeah.
And in the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the guy's talking about the poor dad, financially poor dad, who was a full professor and blah blah blah, but he always thought poor, like, oh, money is bad, it's not about money, blah blah blah. And the rich dad was not educated in, well, I should say not schooled in these systems, but was extremely financially literate and understood buying assets and things that bring you money as opposed to buying liabilities, which makes you middle class, or just dealing with your expenses and buying luxuries first, all these types of things. And that's what I grew up with, understanding of buy gold, which is, I didn't fully understand it. So the first job I had, I was working at IBM. And my first paycheck, I went to buy a gold chain.
Like an IBM.
Yeah,
really?
I was in engineering. I was president of NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers.
Oh, yeah. I was in that one time. When I went back to school after, what am I going to do? I got divorced. I need to go back to school. I need to get something to raise these kids. And I said, engineering is it.
That's money. So I was in the math, science track and all this type of thing. But at a certain point, I don't know. There was definitely a change that occurred where I was like, why should I be in engineering? I should do something that helps black people. In retrospect, engineering could do it.
Yeah, it could.
But I was like, I want to study psychology because, that was my impetus from childhood to understand the problems of black people and to understand what makes us hate each other, sociology, criminology. I was doing all these humanities types of things. So I was on a scholarship it was through this Inroads, which you're probably familiar with. It was like the Upward Bound, but anyway,
no, I don't know that one.
They're the ones who did the placement for coming out of high school. They put you with a company, so I'm there with IBM.
Okay.
And then they were like, well, how are your courses going? Your engineering course? I was like, I'm not taking any. And I was thinking I probably should have waited till after the summer where I got more money. But I was saying all that, the first money I got, I bought a gold chain and gold earrings to go with it, and then a gold ring. All of it had an eagle on it. I was like, yeah, my parents always said invest in gold.
They weren't exactly talking
about coins and bullion. But we always had an understanding of, assets, invest in land and things like this. Nobody in my family to date has ever owned a new car. Or I should say leased a new car to get more debt, and never had a mortgage. They built their own house from scratch to never have a mortgage.
Wow, that is great.
So just my as I'm listening to this, the ideas of financial literacy, it just clicks because my parents were like, if we're saying we don't want to be enslaved, who was this? Malcolm X's father has a quote where he says, the first step back to slavery is debt. So once you understand that, so we've never had credit card. Even to this day, people tell me they're in debt. I always save. So if I earn $3,000 at whatever time I was earning $3,000, what I get now, but I would save at least $1,000. Usually I want to save $1,500 out of it. That's how in 1 year I was saving $30,000.
Wow.
And my goal was 40, but because my family was they enjoyed eating and renting and all this other stuff. But that's my worldview.
And so I mean, money is not in and of itself. It's a medium to do things with. I mean, we do live in this monetized economy, and there could be other ways of doing it. I don't know if you've heard of this Bitcoin thing. Yeah, I don't quite understand it, but I was like, well, I wonder, is it just an alternative money, or is it is it money and everything? Someone, speaking of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all those books, I remember, I don't know if it was in that one or another one, they said, you are wealthy if you're making money when you're asleep.
Right.
You know, and I thought that's really true.
Right.
You know, that you've got
things that work for you. This dollar is your employee, and it's working for you to get more employees.
You working for it.
Right.
That's how most of us do.
Exactly. So, the last point on that. Just yesterday, there's a brother from the Congo who works on my website, and he's been giving all these free lectures and free study groups and all this other stuff. And I was like, you're violating Ma'at, the law of reciprocity, because you're giving all this energy, all this time. Like, he would take a book like this and, like, handwrite the translations in French. He'll handwrite the translation of the entire book. So that people will have the source documenting Kikongo and then not have to worry about the French, but can read it in English. Like, he's doing all this, and he's like, oh, but I think it should be free because, you know, people wouldn't want. I was like, you're defeating yourself before you even get started. I was
maybe his rewards are in heaven, who knows? Yeah,
and we don't do that. Reciprocity is something that African people believe in, so for you to be stream water flowing towards the desert isn't going to give anything back.
That's certainly way. You know, and people do appreciate things if they have to at least trade something. If it's valuable in that way. Okay, do you think your life in Ghana is better, the same, or worse than if you had not moved here?
Better.
Okay. And from what you said, I can understand it.
Right.
Would you recommend or advocate and encourage other African Americans, or what you want to call them, to move to Ghana?
I would encourage Africans to move. I would not encourage African Americans to move.
Okay.
And when I say Africans, I mean people who may qualify under the definition of African Americans, but people who have sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But you say yes.
Yeah, some.
Some.
Those with sense. You know, when Marcus Garvey was talking about the Back to Africa movement, he made a clarification that he's not saying that every single person from the U.S. or Jamaica or anything should go back, because you have some kind of scum of the earth type of people who would not necessarily be good, you know, for what the goals that we say are. So, to me, the African American part means you're schizophrenic. It means that you're going to take the psychotic schizophrenia and bring it here. And I remember, like, when I was here for the study abroad, I saw it like this last wave of colonization is going to be brought by people who think that they're African American. So the Ghanaians who still know how to take a seed of corn and make it into banku, they're getting the platinum chains. They're getting the culture as proffered through, I would say, blackness as defined by white people. So it's, you know, we'll make the people who make the gangster rappers rich are not black people. These are the white suburbans who are like, you fit the description of what we know black people to be. If you're a conscious rapper, no, we don't want to buy it. we want. And
it started off being conscious. It was talking about, you know, raising our awareness of the political thing, you know, in NWA, and then it just, I mean, next thing you know, I was like, how did this happen? It just got so misogynist, so mean, you know. And then Snoop Dogg, who I like his style, but I don't like him. He gets on my nerves. But to me, he was saying, and that could be true. Don't shoot the messenger, because it did point out a lot of awful things that were going on in the black neighborhoods in the ghetto and places that people did not know,
and say, yes, we did a good job.
Well,
because that's intentional. All the stuff that they're talking, like Tupac said the same
thing.
But
at least it was exposed, because a lot of times people, you know, black people, African Americans, black people were moving away from the hood, you know, and moving into the newly integrated black neighborhoods, and just didn't want to hear about it, just didn't want to see it. And I think maybe that certainly brought it up. I remember Ice-T years ago. He was testifying before the Senate committee on something about the Southeast LA situation, and they asked him, well, why are these gangs, you know, killing each other and carrying on? And he just said, you don't have to ask me that. You know why this is happening. You know, this, you know, he mentioned various things and like that. He said another thing, because you don't have to have an MBA to get into this kind of business, and you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So, you know, at first it seemed like going from political, you know, critiquing or consciousness to going to this expose type thing, and then it just went into just meanness, you know, just glorifying killing each other. And even 50 Cent, you know, he has just turned around. You know, I mean, he was from just like P. Diddy, these kids from middle class neighborhoods with you know, families. Even he sort of turned around. Now his kid he lives in gated community. His kid's going to private school, you know. So I don't know, but it's still going on. It is still that, to me, misogynist, mean-spirited, glorifying being a thug, rapping, you know. But I don't listen to it every day, so maybe it's changed.
Well, this is, to me, the thing that once you know that who your enemy is and that everything that they do is intentional, then you know that the ones that people in Africa know are these same ones who you're talking about, glorify the violence, the misogyny. Like, I had one brother who considers himself to be conscious, or whatever that means, who was like, yeah, the reason why all black people in the U.S. are criminals is because, right, is because it was the criminals who were enslaved. So the criminals were sent over, and now look, they're just doing more criminal. And this is his view. And I'm like, wow. It's like I would have to go to preschool with him to bring him up to speed on the criminalization of a race, privatized prison, you know, all these types of things. The new Jim Crow, what do you call this? The convict leasing and the history of that down the South.
It could just be as simple as an inferiority complex. So I'm going to talk about you before you say something about me.
No. Like, he was really being sincere. Like, this is, like, he was saying, like, an epiphany, like, yo, wow, this really explains. Right. This, and he was really being genuine and sincere, and I was just like, he needs so much information. He really needs.
But you know, that's it. That is the image.
That's an intentional image. That there's a point. That's the colonization. That once we can, it's a cultural colonization or anti-African cultural colonization, and the people who are in charge of bringing it to the rest of the world are so-called African Americans. So the people who they know here, who they go to the concerts, like Chris Brown and Busta Rhymes and all these people beating Rihanna and all this stuff, these are the people who they know. But then you ask them, okay, well, have you heard of Bomani Maasa? No, they don't even. They're like, did you sneeze? What are you? You know, if I like list out all the people who are talking about revolution, you know, on these different levels, like even Dead Prez, who's probably the best known, they probably like, I don't know who that is.
Well, what do you think about Tupac? Because you know they've turned him into a saint. I don't know whether he is or not.
Well, this is when I was growing up. I was listening to Tupac, and he was very much misogynistic, very much. But he had a phase of being positive. Now,
but I mean, was he politically astute? Because you know, misogynism is sort of like the Western thing. You know, I mean, women have been just put down and abused and whatever. I mean, that's just as sort of that's the concept that women are inferior to men. I'm just saying, just because
I was actually going to mention Tupac earlier, that his thing was that if he lives in a place that's bad, so if he keeps talking about it enough, then eventually somebody's going to come around and change it. That was his view, which I see as that's what he said. That's a quote.
Okay,
you know? See,
that's what I was thinking when the rappers started
as an expose.
Yeah, expose.
And this is, to me, a very naive view, because the ones who you are telling it to, they're the ones who created it. So it means that you don't know who your enemy is, and you don't know that everything that you're seeing, which is bad, is intentional. So as you're saying, oh, look at how bad this is, we're getting shot up, they're giving each other high fives, like, great, good job. That's $1 million that I owe you on that bet, that they're still doing it. When you look at South Central LA and what Ice-T was talking about, that the rise of the gangs were from the ashes of the Black Panther Party, from the US movement, that is all intentional, that we we don't make the guns, we don't make the drugs, we don't make any of it, but how did
fly
it
'em
magically
in.
appear? There's
true.
a very short documentary called Crack the CIA, which talks about the role of the CIA flying cocaine into Arkansas. This is when Bill Clinton was the governor there. And this whole route, and how the CIA attempted to get the police departments to bring the crack into the communities. And at one point in time, there was a police officer in LA who did an expose. So when the head of the CIA was there in LA giving an interview, he said, "How come you all approached me to bring crack into the community?" And, you know, it's a big thing. So the actual footage of it was a nationwide thing, but you see these things get suppressed because not many people know about it. But it was like a national news story that here is somebody who was in the LAPD who was approached to say, "We need you to put these into the community." We have these...
and this is not without precedent. You know, look at the
all.
opium into the China.
That's
you
all.
know.
Look at how did the guns get into Africa? Where's our gun factory?
Yeah.
Who ends up with it? The people who should have them don't have them, but the people who don't need them are the ones who have them, and wherever they have them are the places where there are resources that the West wants and needs, whether it's diamonds, whether it's coltan, whether it's oil. The only people who magically pop up with these guns are the ones who the West gives the guns to. But once we understand who, like the foundation of all wisdom is to know who you are and to know who your enemy is. If you don't know those two things, then everything else. Neely Fuller, who I mentioned earlier, has a quote where he says, "If you don't understand what white supremacy is, how it works and what it is, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you."
Yeah.
So let's say you're a scientist, but you don't understand these things. You will be the one who creates a disease that selectively kills African people because you don't know who you are and who you should be protecting and who your enemy is and why they're employing you to do it. You'll create a bomb that leaves all the buildings and all the white people, but only incinerates those who have melanin. You know a lot. You know physics, you know calculus, you know algebra, you know everything, but you don't understand this fundamental thing about who you are and who your enemy is. So everything else that you think you know is only confusing to you. So this is the situation of our professors, our so-called leaders. They don't know the lesson from the past 500 years. 1471 up to now, we had the opportunity to know this is our enemy.
Yeah.
Everything that they do, structural adjustment, colonization, enslavement, everything they do is as an enemy and what an enemy would do to you. I remember I said this at a speech that the director had me go to this SOS Mina.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the teachers was like, "I've never in my life," she's a grown adult, "I've never heard anyone in my life say that our colonial masters were our enemies." And I was like,
"Really?
Well, welcome to first grade." Everything you learn from here on is the beginning of your knowledge. Because if you don't know that, then you see this white Jesus and you don't understand what it is. You see the educational system. It's a good quote by Kwame Ture as well, where he says,
"Hey, this is me." Yeah. Oh, God, I can't believe it. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, just, let's say about 10 more minutes, and I'll be there. I didn't realize it was that long. It's just been such a good conversation. Okay, thank you. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry, but I really appreciate your taking the time.
No problem. This Kwame Ture quote is that you can make no analysis in any aspect of the life of an oppressed people and leave out the oppressor. Anytime you make an analysis in the life of oppressed people and leave out the oppressor, you'll always invariably blame the oppressed for their own problems. And this is what continental Africans do. Our leaders, we are so corrupt. Without questioning anything about how did that come about, one, who does it benefit, and who started it. If you can't get enough history to know who started it, once you know who benefited it, then you already get your answer to that first question. But if you are coming to try to understand, the situation that we're in, we have to understand who our enemy is. and it's very, very
That's
cut
interesting
and
that
dry.
lady would say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? I remember when I first came over here, and I was somewhat surprised, because this coming from the '60s and the '70s and this whole thing of our being this, understanding the racism and our history in America, and then to come over here and hear Africans basically. It was just like, yeah, the British were here, and now they're gone.
Right.
I mean, I was
and
to me.
This is a strength that diasporan Africans have that continental Africans is unfathomable.
Yeah, but in a way, I guess it was a bit refreshing to me, and this is why, because it seemed that when you're angry, you can't be rational. When you understand but are not angry, then you can sort of move forward. And that's where I thought that they were. Now, of course, the lady right there, you were saying, I had no idea, raise them as enemies. So I can see people saying, yeah, they were our enemies. But it was more like, I must admit, in America, the whole racism, black is inferior, you were slaves and it's just like, if you move to some place where people just say, okay, that's white, these people are white, these people are black, we're black, and we're all people, and we're just going to move forward from here. I mean, that was refreshing, although that isn't happening, and it won't happen, Well, but that's basically what I was saying. I thought it was just, I'll just say refreshing. I'm trying to think of another word. Their lack of obvious anger.
Having their world centered around this type of interaction.
Well, no, that the fact that they were like, they were not mad at the British, or they weren't angry at the British. It was just like, this is a point in history, and now we're moving forward.
Right. This is a major issue, is that we don't understand the internal and the external. Here on the continent, we only understand the internal. This is also why I see like a HBCU or like a high school almost. Like when you're in high school, you think the buck stops with the principal. That's as far as you can see. And the president here is the principal, right? So you have people who are popular in school. You have whatever, but your worldview is very, very tiny. You don't understand the superintendent. You don't understand the board. You don't understand the national, federal policy in terms of education and what the goals are and who is supposed to serve.
Well, there's some. It's not just the NDC, but the CBB, or they have come out against the EPA. This economic partnership agreement, and I think government Ghana is going to go ahead and sign it. But there are people who do have an understanding. Unfortunately, they're in the minority, 1.3%.
This is what I'm saying. That, and again, I'm speaking generally because, like I said, you can find very few continental Africans who have this broader global African world type of perspective. You can find Africans from the diaspora who have this cultural specificity, but both are minorities, and we're talking generally the strength of the continent is the specificity and being able to bring that to bear. The strength of the diaspora is the ideology of this global type of world. But when I look, again, generally speaking here, people don't understand the interaction of the internal and the external. And it's similar to like Malcolm X gave a analogy about if someone sticks a knife into your back and then pulls it out an inch, that's not really progress. That what we have here is a bit different in that we have Eurasians who are consistently stabbing us and they're still doing it right now as we speak, and we're saying, you know what, this floor is wet, maybe we're not sweeping enough. It's your blood that's on the ground, but your response is completely out of context to what the actual situation. That it's not the British were here and they left. When did they leave? When did they stop doing coups? When did they stop manipulating your currency? When did they stop changing your commodities and what you can get for them? Exporting raw and importing. That when you don't understand what's going on, again, everything else you think you understand confuses you. So you say post-colonial as opposed to neo-colonial. And this is the most psychotic thing in the world to say post-colonial. It's
Or
like, okay, when did it, or
yeah.
post-racial, it's like, when did it, or post-slavery. It's like, well, give me the date. When did it end?
Yeah,
So
that's interesting, because that's what Jake was just saying the other day, that, you know, it's still the same economic and political relationship.
Which is why it's neo-colonial. But if you don't understand that, then you say, oh, the British were here and then they left.
Yeah.
And you don't understand the interaction. So it's sort of like Amos Wilson, who I keep citing, the psychologist. He talks about it like African people throughout the world. He was talking about black people in the U.S. Are like an abused wife. And I was going to say this to the high schoolers, but I was like, maybe that's a bit too old for them. But the abused wife, maybe she was abusing a child, whatever. But she consistently looks at herself and says, why is he beating me?
Yes.
So you're saying, well, maybe I should have cooked the food a little bit better.
Yes.
Or maybe I should have cleaned the house, and he's beating the crap. What she needs to understand, that this is my implacable foe. This is my enemy who is intent on my destruction, whether it's quick or slow, but is intent on my destruction regardless. So no matter what I'm doing that I think is... So this is what I see when I see continental Africans who talk about our corruption, without understanding that the very infrastructure that you have of your government is set up to be corrupt. Because when you look at like Walter Rodney's thesis of how Europe underdeveloped Africa, that when you build a road, it's a road not to help the people to save their souls. It's a road from the gold mine directly out. When we build a hospital, it's for this. When we have an education system, it's for this. Whatever we do is not in your interest, it's to serve their interest. And so when your entire structure of government is set up to help your enemies take out everything without having to answer to anyone, I don't have to answer to you. Now we just say, all right, now let's take out those whites and put in the blacks. We haven't questioned Parliament. We haven't questioned the judicial. We haven't questioned, do we need a president? What is this whole thing? It goes back to what we're talking about. Are we Africanizing socialism or capitalism, communism? That we have those same structures that were set up to be corrupt and steal from the people without any checks or balances. We took out those whites, and it's like a refrigerator. We took out the white parts and then put in black parts and think it's not going to get cold now. But it's still doing the exact same thing that it was set up to do. But we don't understand these interactions between the external and internal. We only look at internal. And this is what I used to have a lot of these exasperating conversations with continental Africans to help them try to see the internal, external, because you're only looking here.
That's right.
So your analysis is only blaming each other.
You're right. We blame ourselves.
And
that's so true.
They put it in terms of saying we're taking responsibility, but that's the furthest thing from being responsible. If you're taking responsibility, then you say, this is my enemy. This is what my enemy is doing to me, and now I'm going to take responsibility to deal with this enemy. That's when you're being responsible. You can see, what are you doing internally that's preventing you from dealing with this enemy? What is the wife do? She is to blame in a sense, because she's staying there. She's trying to cook the turkey roast better. And in that sense, she could blame herself. But what she needs to do is to say, all right, this behavior that I was doing is incorrect, so I can blame myself for that or whatever, take responsibility for that. But what I need to fundamentally do is deal with my enemy who is beating me, whether that comes in chopping off the hands, whether that comes to whatever you need to do. That's when she's taking responsibility.
Even though let me just say, parenthetically, even I understand, and it certainly applies, the wife beating, because that's, what happens, and the woman will blame herself, or she's wondering, if I just do this a little better, that okay. Well, but in that situation, because it is a relationship, ultimately it's trying to understand why that person is doing that to change their behavior. I mean, just in that relationship. So I will hope you don't use that, because that people might not be able to see that in just that marital relationship, and certainly here in Ghana, as being the enemy. There is but I understand it's, to me, I perfectly understand what you're saying, because that's certainly what happens, and that black people in America have done this too. That we, oh God, what am I doing? In the '60s, oh, we need to learn how to talk better, and we learn how to
educated,
read. Get educated, read all the write novels, and you know, this and that. Dress well, write for. Did all that.
The analysis he was given was pertaining specifically to black people in the U.S., but we can see it as well here. Just in terms of, not it's a perfect analogy, but the inappropriate behavior, that what you're attempting to do to resolve the issue is not dealing with the root of the issue, or even showing an understanding of what the issue is at all. You're looking at yourself and what your behavior is.
As you being the problem.
As you being the problem. And you're trying to change things that will do nothing to change what the situation is.
That's right.
If you are going to look at yourself and change something that allows you to deal with the actual problem, which is your phobia.
Okay, let's see. Okay, and this is my last question, and I think I know the name. Do you plan to be buried in Ghana?
In Africa, in some place in Africa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's it.
Oh, that was easy.
Yes. Okay. Well, I gotta go because. Yes.